After they arrived in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, Jianchen contemplated what he should do next. Although the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire was the safest place in the southern region, he could not remain here forever. After they arrived in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, Jianchen contemplated what he should do next. Although the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire was the safest place in the southern region, he could not remain here forever. After all, he could say that he had already fallen out with the 9th prince of the Blood Sun Empire, with what had happened in the Een Mountains of Seven's despair. He was closer than ever to the 9th prince here. Aside from that, although the imperial capital could keep Huayan at bay, it was keeping him at bay at most. If Huayan truly wanted to act recklessly, the Blood Sun Empire would not be able to do anything to him. After all, an extremely terrifying Great Elder supported the Empyrean demon cult behind Huayan, let alone the eternal Blood Sun Empire. But even those peak clans of the Cloud Plain did not dare to provoke the Great Elder so easily. In the current Cloud Plain, probably nowhere is completely safe apart from the central region. Do I really have to go to the central region? Jianchen thought. He could not help but think of Tong Tian now that the central region had been brought up. The Tong family that Tong Tian came from was located in the central region. He still possessed the jade pendant Tong Tian had given him. No, I definitely can't go to the central region. Huayan has already come personally to kill me. It means that he already views me as a thorn in his side. If I go to the central region, he'll definitely come pursuing. Once I draw him to the central region, it'll increase the danger to Uncle Xiao as well. Uncle Xiao holds the 9 blood beads and soul beads that the Empyrean demon cult has spent countless years refining. This matter ties into far too many things, so if the people from the Empyrean demon cult learn about this, the consequences will be unimaginable. As a result, I can't go. I can't make it more dangerous for Uncle Xiao. Jianchen frowned. He discovered that although the Cloud Plain was vast, there was actually nowhere where he could go. This was all because the organization behind Huayan was just too great. Otherwise, although Huayan would be able to move around freely the southern region with his strength as an infinite prime, there would be no need for eternal empires to treat him with caution. Jianchen, I heard that the Saints' world has a total of 49 great plains and 81 great planets. Our Cloud Plain is only one of the 49 plains. Since we can't stay on the Cloud Plain anymore, why don't we leave temporarily and return once we're powerful enough? Kaya said. Although she had not spent a lot of time conscious in the Saints' world, she possessed some basic understanding. She had also learnt just how powerful the Empyrean demon cult was from what Jianchen had told her. As a result, she understood just how troublesome of a matter it was now that they had caught the eye of an infinite prime of the Empyrean demon cult. Kaya paused. After some thought, she continued, moreover, with our cultivation speed, I believe we won't need to fear Huayan before long. Leave the Cloud Plain? A sliver of bitterness appeared on Jianchen's face. It was easy to say that, but it was nowhere close to easy when it came to practice. He did not have 5 colored divine crystals to pay to use the teleportation formations. The teleportation formations between planes were extremely expensive to use. In the past, Fairy How you even had to kill an extremely powerful primordial realm expert for the Xiandao Empire to obtain enough 5-colored divine crystals to go home. Right now, although Jianchen possessed supreme quality divine crystals from Yaxilian, it was still not enough once they had been converted to 5-colored divine crystals. At this moment, the faces of Jianchen and Kaya changed. They suddenly looked behind them, and found that 3 demonic auras radiated from the end of the bustling street. They approached Jianchen and Kaya extremely quickly. What powerful demonic auras! They're from the Empyrean demon cult. They're god kings from the Empyrean demon cult. They've actually come to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. The Empyrean demon cult really is too arrogant. They don't even know how to keep a low profile in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. They're completely looking down on the Blood Sun Empire. The arrival of the 3 late god kings from the Empyrean demon cult immediately attracted the attention of many people in the imperial capital. However, even though they looked at the 3 god kings in displeasure, no one dared to stand forward. As if the 3 god kings wanted the people there to know they were from the Empyrean demon cult, They did not conceal their presences at all even though they were in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. Their late God King presences surged out as demonic aura emanated into their surroundings, shrouding them as a thick, black mist. At the same time, at the other end of the bustling street several kilometers away, there was a white-robed young man who seemed to be in his 20s with a fan. He strolled around idly with 2 female attendants. When the 3 God Kings of the Empyrean demon cult entered the imperial city, the young man stopped. He frowned and said, "The Empyrean demon cult is just too arrogant. What do they think the imperial capital of our Blood Sun Empire is? It's not a place where they can behave as they wish. Your Highness, looking at how they're behaving, they're probably hunting down people that have offended them. Let's just endure a small matter like this." "We can't make a ruckus," a female attendant said from behind the young man. The young man's face sank. Suddenly, he opened his fan and said, "If I just let this pass, will our imperial family still have any pride left?" Jianchun and Kaya became grim when they sensed the 3 God Kings in pursuit. Jianchun called out, "They've arrived here faster than I imagined. It looks like they don't plan on treating the Blood Sun Empire cautiously at all, and plan to eliminate us in the imperial capital. Let's go." Jianchun grabbed Kaya and immediately took off, approaching the imperial palace of the Blood Sun Empire. However, the 2 of them were unable to take to the skies in the imperial capital. They could only hover along the ground, so their speed was naturally drastically affected as a result. Did you think you'd be safe once you made it to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire? You are far too naive. At this moment, a deep voice rang out from behind. The 3 God Kings had already locked onto Jianchun's presence. They were completely fearless in the imperial capital, where their speed suddenly exploded, and they directly took to the skies. They made it past Jianchun and Kaya in the blink of an eye, landing before them to block their path. The vice leader had personally ordered your capture. So even if you escape to the ends of the world, you won't be able to run away from our Empyrean demon cult. Just give up, sneered a God King. He directly attacked the 2 of them after that. Clearly, he was unwilling to waste too much time. After all, this was the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. Although their statuses could act as a form of deterrence, it would not benefit them at all if they wasted too much time. Jianchun and Kaya became extremely stern. Jianchun equipped his god artifact as soon as possible and circulated the chaotic force within him, pushing the defenses of the chaotic body to the limit. He even drew the cracked, startling rainbow sword. The Empyrean demon cult really is getting bolder and bolder. At this moment, a cold snort rang out from behind. With a flash, a person appeared before Jianchun and Kaya. He was a young man who wore white robes and held a fan. The young man's face did not change when he was faced with the attacks of the 3 God Kings. He directly swung his fan. Immediately, the air around them moved. The world seemed to be flipped from the young man's action. The power of laws in the young man's fan seemed to affect the space there, making it become slightly different. The attacks from the 3 God Kings rebounded without any prior signs when they came in contact with the space. The energy that they sent towards Jianchun and Kaya had been reflected back towards them. The expressions of the 3 God Kings changed. However, they were experienced after all, so even though this had happened suddenly, they reacted as quickly as possible. God King level laws descended, and they sent out a second attack to nullify the first. Immediately, powerful energy splayed out. If they were in the wilderness, the energy would be powerful enough to crush mountains. However, an extremely powerful formation protected the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, so the energy naturally failed to cause any damage at all. The young man had nullified the attacks from the 3 late God Kings single-handedly. Moreover, he remained composed, without losing the upper hand at all. He was clearly extremely powerful. The young man had nullified the attacks from the 3 late God Kings single-handedly. Moreover, he remained composed, without losing the upper hand at all. He was clearly extremely powerful. As Jianchun encountered more and more God Kings, even clashing with some several times, he started to possess some understanding towards them. When the young man moved, Jianchun could clearly sense that he was also a late God King like the God Kings from the Empyrean demon cult. They were at the same level of cultivation. Yet the young man managed to match them all by himself. He was definitely a great prodigy. The imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire really is a nest of monsters. Just a random person can be this powerful. Jianchen was secretly surprised. Before him, the three god kings from the Empyrean demon cult churned with demonic aura, which shrouded their figures in black mist. One of them said sternly, "Who are you bold enough to get in the way of the Empyrean demon cult's matters? Leave immediately, and we can forget about what you just did. Otherwise, you will become an enemy of the Empyrean demon cult." The Empyrean demon cult had always acted as they wished on the cloud plane. Even after arriving in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, they did not tone it down in the slightest. They were completely fearless. The young man opened his fan and flapped it leisurely. He sneered. "Aren't the three of you looking down on the Blood Sun Empire too much? Why don't you look at where you are with what you said before? You dare to threaten me in my own territory? Let alone you three unimpressive protectors. Even if your vice leader comes here personally, he'll have to consider something like that properly before doing anything." At this moment, a large number of guards that belonged to the imperial capital hurried over from the surroundings. Several god kings had already flown out from the imperial palace as well, approaching them with lightning speed. In just a few seconds, the three god kings from the Empyrean demon cult were surrounded. The god kings from the imperial palace looked at them coldly as they surrounded them. They had already emitted their tremendous presences slowly. Even though they were surrounded, the three god kings remained composed. They did not become flustered at all. One of them said, "The vice leader has personally ordered the capture of these two people. Does your Blood Sun Empire plan on protecting them?" "I have no interests in who the vice leader wants to capture. This is the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, not a place where you can act as you wish. Your Empyrean demon cult still hasn't achieved absolute supremacy in the southern region. Please return. Otherwise, I can only send you out of the city," the white-robed young man said coldly. The three protectors of the Empyrean demon cult contemplated it shortly. After judging the situation they were in, they could only leave powerlessly in the end. With the departure of the three protectors, Jianchen clasped his fist at the young man and said, "I'm Jianchen. Thank you for your help today. I will remember the kindness you have shown." Jianchen. The young man's eyes immediately narrowed when he heard Jianchen's name. He stared at Jianchen with some surprise. "You're that Jianchen who defeated a god king in the northern region?" "That's me," said Jianchen. The young man smiled slightly and studied Jianchen. He said, "No wonder the three protectors of the Empyrean demon cult are hunting you down while you're still an overgod. You captured Yashi Lian in the past and got the Divine King to use her as a hostage, forcing Huayan to agree to his terms. With Huayan's temperament, he'll definitely nurse a grievance because of that. Moreover, you're a supreme overgod who can make it onto the overgod's plaque with your impressive talent. You'll pose quite the threat to the Empyrean demon cult in the future, so Huayan will definitely move against you. Of the three vice leaders, Huayan is the most intolerant and vengeful. You need to be more careful now that you've caught Huayan's eyes." As soon as he reached there, the young man paused. He gazed off into the distance and became stern. He said, "It looks like Huayan treats you with far more importance than I had imagined. He has actually come personally. Jianchen, you better leave here fast." As a vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult, Huayan possesses various secret technique. Coupled with his cultivation as an infinite prime, he will be able to deal with you easily without violating any rules of our Blood Sun Empire. Huayan had arrived extremely quickly. Before the young man had even finished speaking, Huayan had appeared on the street silently. He stared at Jianchen coldly. On the other hand, Jianchen did not hesitate at all. He left as quickly as he could with Kaya, disappearing from the street in an instant. The white-clothed young man only stood before Huayan. He said steadily, "I never thought that the famed vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult, Huayan, would personally visit our Blood Sun Empire. I wonder whether our Blood Sun Empire should receive you as an esteemed guest, or maintain the status quo and directly ask you to leave. Vice leader Huayan, you're making it very difficult for me." Huayan was just about to pursue Jianchen. He looked at the young man before him, and he immediately frowned. He did not recognize this young man, but seeing how he did not fear him as a mere god-king and the fact that he had used our, when referring to the empire, Huayan instantly determined that this young man was a part of the imperial family. Moreover, he possessed quite some status in the family. However, it did not matter even if he had some status. As a vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult, even the ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire would fear him slightly. He immediately snorted coldly. "I've come to capture wanted people. I have no time to tangle with you. Leave immediately, or don't blame me for being rude." As he said that, the pressure of the primordial realm radiated from Huayan, directly forcing the young man away. "Huayan, this is the Blood Sun Empire, not your Empyrean demon cult. If you want to act so recklessly, I can only make you leave the imperial capital." Just when Huayan released his pressure, a heavy and clear voice directly rang out in his head from the imperial palace. I naturally know the rules of your Blood Sun Empire. My visit today has nothing to do with you. As long as you don't get in my way, I won't violate any of your rules," Huayan replied coldly. He no longer bothered to deal with the young man, disappearing with a flash in pursuit of Jian Chun. The young man with a fan looked in the direction where Huayan had vanished off to. There was a sliver of reluctance in his eyes, and he said to the imperial palace, "Imperial protector, Jian Chun is a talent of our southern region after all. He'll definitely become an expert who can dominate the region in the future. Are we just supposed to watch the Empyrean demon cult do harm to him from the sidelines? There are countless talents in the saints' world, and even many unprecedented prodigies. However, just how many of them are able to make it to the apex in the end? Even if they're first on the Overgod's plaque or first on the God King's throne, aren't there many examples where they die before they can rise to the peak of their power? There's no need to offend the Empyrean demon cult over such matters." The heavy and clear voice rang out again from the imperial palace, but only the young man could hear it. Currently, Jian Chun and Kaya moved through the streets of the imperial capital rapidly, trying to pull as far away from Huayan as possible. He thought of any plans he could use. However, at this moment, Jian Chun and Kaya both stopped as they hovered above the ground. They gazed ahead. Before them stood a white-robed, ruddy old man. He stared at Jian Chun and Kaya with a strange light in his eyes. "Chanlong, how are you here?" Kaya asked. She was surprised. The old man was Master Chanlong, the person that Jian Chun had some conflict with in the past. However, Jian Chun's grievances with Master Chanlong had gradually been resolved through the gratitude Jian Chun felt towards him for saving Kaya when the 7 protectors of the Earth Spirit sect killed their way into the provincial city of the Dong'an province. Jian Chun also felt extremely surprised about meeting Chanlong here. Master Chanlong became extremely stern. He said with a deep voice, "I know you're in extremely deep trouble. Don't say anything, just follow me quickly." Before he had even finished speaking, Master Chanlong turned around and left. Jian Chun and Kaya looked at each other. Although they had no idea what Master Chanlong had in mind, they clearly had no other choices at a time like this. They could only follow Master Chanlong closely. Under Master Chanlong's lead, the 3 of them arrived at an extremely large square in the imperial capital very soon. Just the width of the square was several dozen kilometers, and it was completely packed. The most eye-catching part of it was an extremely large flying vehicle parked at the very center of the square. It was several dozen kilometers long and several dozen kilometers high. It hovered in the sky like an imposing mountain, basically taking up the entire square. Just a single glance at it would make people feel overwhelmed. "Take this and board the ship with me quickly. Once we're on the spatial battleship, we'll be temporarily safe." Master Chanlong gave a jade talisman to Kaya and Jian Chun before taking them towards the spatial battleship quickly. Spatial battleship? A sliver of doubt appeared in Jian Chun's eyes. He looked at the humongous flying vehicle before him in confusion as he followed Chanlong towards it. At this moment, he no longer cared about the purposes the spatial battleship served. Even if he had to wade through a world of danger to evade the pursuit of an infinite prime, he would do it. "Jian Chun, stop!" Just when Jian Chun was about to board the spatial battleship, a thunderous voice boomed in his head. The terrifying sound waves rebounded in Jian Chun's head, causing his soul to rock violently, almost collapsing. His consciousness became blurred while the chaotic force within him paused at that moment. He had almost fallen out of the sky. Behind them, Huayan hurried over as he stared at Jianchen with a sunken face. Beside Jianchen, Kaya sensed what was happening and immediately grabbed Jianchen's shoulder. Her speed suddenly exploded as she flew towards the cabin door. "Don't you even think about leaving the cloud plane." Huayan was pale. At that moment, he could no longer care about breaking the rules of the Blood Sun Empire. He raised his hand and reached towards Jianchen from afar. As he extended his hand, his entire arm elongated. His hand had turned into a black cloud that obscured the sky and trapped space, lunging towards Jianchen and Kaya. Kaya and Jianchen immediately sank. The tremendous pressure had immobilized the two of them. They could only watch on as Huayan's hand fell towards them. Chapter 1987. The red-robed old man. This was the second time Huayan had attacked Jianchen and Kaya. The first time, he had just casually struck out. He did not aim to injure Jianchen and Kaya. Rather, he wanted to draw out the Divine King who was hiding in the shadows. As a result, Jianchen and Kaya were still able to fight back at that time. Even though they were as insignificant as ants to primordial realm experts, they could still bite back during the prior encounter. However, now that Jianchen and Kaya were about to enter the spatial battleship, Huayan, who understood the vehicle's power very well, directly struck out furiously in a panic. The might of this strike was far greater than the one when he first attacked them. Just the tremendous pressure had frozen Kaya and Jianchen. Master Chanlong's face changed all of a sudden. He wanted to hurry back to save Kaya, but there was nothing he could do against a strike from a primordial realm expert. "Huayan, aren't you looking down on the Blood Sun Empire too much? It looks like it's time to show that your Empyrean demon cult has become swollen with arrogance." At this moment, an elderly voice rang out. A red-robed old man had silently appeared above the spatial battleship. The old man kept his presence concealed, making it impossible to tell his cultivation level or detect his existence. He seemed to have fused with the entire sky when he appeared. The old man looked at Huayan coldly and raised his right hand calmly. He gently extended a finger towards the hand that reached towards Jianchen and Kaya. The movement seemed simple. It did not give off any pulses of energy, nor did any particular pressure accompany it. However, the space before the old man suddenly contracted and produced a ripple in space, spreading out at an unbelievable speed. When Huayan's huge hand was only 10 meters away from Jianchen and Kaya, it suddenly came to a halt. The space around it seemed to have been frozen at that moment. However, the effects of the gesture clearly did not just end there. In the next moment, the space in the area shattered loudly from the pulse, forming a huge crack. Countless spatial shards and spatial wind surged out, surrounding Huayan's hand. The spatial shards and wind were extremely terrifying. Huayan's hand was reduced to a bloody mess in a single instance from the ravaging of the shards and wind. Huayan's gaze was cold. He looked at the old man emotionlessly. The old man had trapped his right hand there, so he had to endure the ravaging of the spatial shards and wind. No matter how hard he tried, his hand remained trapped there. However, he completely ignored his right hand. He looked at Jianchen, and his killing intent immediately erupted. With a thought, a sword appeared over his head. It was red as if it had been doused with blood. The moment it appeared, it gave off an extremely heavy smell of blood. The wails of countless ghosts seemed to emerge as countless souls struggled in there. Clearly, the sword had been covered in blood for who knows how long. It had completely turned into a demonic artifact. Swish! As soon as the sword had appeared, it shot off as a red streak of light, directly slashing through space towards Jianchen. Huayan's desire to kill Jianchen had already reached the point of no return. Now that Jianchen was about to board the spatial battleship and leave the cloud plane, he could not allow it. As a result, he basically wanted to kill Jianchen regardless of the consequences right now. Even if he had to offend the Blood Sun Empire, even if he had to lose an arm. The red sword moved extremely quickly, so fast that distance seemed insignificant before it. With a flash, it arrived before Jianchen, stabbing towards his head with a bloody presence. However, it was also at this moment that the space around Jianchen and Kaya pulsed gently. In this moment of life and death, Jianchen and Kaya vanished. The sword hit nothing. Huayan's gaze shifted upwards slightly. He looked at the huge cabin door of the spatial battleship and saw that Jianqin and Kaya had already appeared outside the cabin silently. They were just about to enter. This person is wanted by our Empyrean demon cult. He is related to a major matter that has happened to our cult recently. If you stop me, you are opposing the Empyrean demon cult. I will definitely report this matter to the higher-ups. Once the Great Elder is alarmed, you won't be able to endure the consequences, Huayan roared out. With a thought, the sword flashed and continued towards Jianqin. He was not afraid of failing to kill Jianqin. His demonic artifact had the ability to devour souls. Those who were slain by the sword could have their souls directly wiped out if he chose to. As long as he injured Jianqin with the sword, even if it just scratched him, his demonic artifact could suck away Jianqin's soul instantly. The red-robed old man did not waver at all from Huayan's threats. Do you think that you'll be able to scare me once you mention the Great Elder of the Empyrean demon cult? I tell you what's even more funny. A mere overgod being able to alarm the Great Elder that rarely ever appears. Huayan, don't you think what you're saying is rather hilarious? With that, the old man grabbed at space. With his gesture, the world seemed to enter his palm, and the sword that shot towards Jianqin appeared in his hand silently. The old man gripped the blade with 2 fingers. No matter how the sword struggled, it was unable to break free from the old man's grasp. At this moment, Kaya had already grabbed Jianqin's shoulder, entering the spatial battleship with Chanlong. They had vanished from Huayan's view. Huayan's face became terrifyingly sunken. He understood the power of the spatial battleship. Once Jianqin had entered the cabin, it would mean he had lost his opportunity to eliminate Jianqin unless this overgod decided to come out again. Naturally, the spatial battleship would come across various dangers as it moved through outer space. It would even encounter the attacks of extremely powerful space beasts. As a result, various formations covered the spatial battleship, making it extremely powerful in terms of both offense and defense. With his cultivation as a first heavenly layer infinite prime, there was nothing he could do to it. Chapter 1988. Houston's disaster as for tailing the spatial battleship along the way and killing Jianqin after he disembarked. That was even more impossible. This was because once the spatial battleship reached outer space and set off, even 9th heavenly layer infinite primes would not be able to follow it. Probably only chaotic primes could match its speed. After all, it was a form of transportation between the 49 Great Planes and the 81 Great Planets of the Saints' world. Naturally, it would have to move extremely quickly. Outside the spatial battleship, Huayan stared at Jianqin, who had disappeared into the cabin door, with a sunken face. He greatly resented the red-robed old man who had stopped him. If it were not for this old man who had interfered time and time again, Jianqin would already be in his hands. Unfortunately, despite also being an infinite prime, he was not as powerful as the red-robed old man, so he could only bury the hatred in his heart. Huayan, leave the imperial capital, said the red-robed old man. His indifferent voice possessed a certain coldness. The Empyrean demon cult was in existence many organizations on the cloud plane found repulsive. If it were not for the mysterious and terrifying Great Elder, the Empyrean demon cult definitely would not still exist after what it had done throughout the years. Only now did Huayan draw his right hand back. His entire hand had vanished already. However, he paid no attention to the injuries of his arm. He stared at the red-robed old man emotionlessly and snorted coldly before directly leaving. He had already lost his chance to kill Jianqin. Now in the cabin, Jianqin gradually recovered from the bellow that had stunned his soul. Afterwards, under Master Chanlong's lead, they made their way through the spatial battleship before stopping in an extremely large cabin. The cabin was clearly at the bottom of the spatial battleship. Several hundred cushion-sized pedestals were set up neatly there, and quite a few people were scattered across them. Under Master Chanlong's lead, Jianqin and Kaya sat down on the pedestals as well. What is this place? Jianqin looked around. He was in doubt. Master Chanlong sat on a pedestal beside Jianqin. He said to Jianqin and Kaya secretly, spatial battleships are extremely well-known vehicles for transportation in the Saints' world. They are for journeys between planes. Although there are teleportation formations across planes in the Saints' world, they're extremely expensive to use. Even some primordial realm experts can't afford to use them. As for spatial battleships, they are much cheaper than the teleportation formations, such that even a few deities can afford to use them. The only downside is that they are much slower compared to teleportation formations. Teleportation formations can traverse the distance between planes in an extremely short amount of time, no matter how far apart they are. However, spatial battleships need years, decades, or even centuries to reach their destination. Clearly, Master Qianlong understood spatial battleships extremely well. He explained them to Jianchen and Kaiya. Jianchen knew that he was about to leave the cloud plane on the spatial battleship. He completely fell silent as the matter weighed on his heart. His face was filled with worry. Everything had happened just too suddenly. He was not prepared. In particular, he was worried about the Tianyuan clan. This was because Rui Jin, Honglian, Heiyu Nubi's Sacred Feather, and so on, the people who had come up from the Tianyuan continent with him, all remained in the Tianyuan clan. Now, I can only hope that the Divine King can protect the Tianyuan clan, Jianchen thought. He was filled with bitterness. He had never thought that as a mighty vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult and a powerful primordial realm expert, Huayan would actually come personally to kill a mere overgod like him. He was indeed helpless against the pursuit of a primordial realm expert with his current strength. Even fleeing was wishful thinking. If experts from the Blood Sun Empire had not stopped Huayan, he would fail to even board this spatial battleship. I really had no choice with leaving this time. Huayan, I will return. Jianchen clasped his hands as his eyes shone with determination. Back on the cloud plane, not only was the central region the center of the vast place, but it was also the most prosperous region of the cloud plane. Most of the organizations who stood at the peak of the cloud plane were located here. Moreover, the only everlasting empire of the entire cloud plane was located here as well. Right now, in the remote wilderness of the central region, Houston currently fled in a disheveled shape in his blood-red robes. He was covered in wounds right now, and every single one of them was vicious, where blood constantly poured out. He faced the merciless pursuit of over a dozen god kings. Behind him, the god kings looked at Houston with burning desire. They pursued him as they fought against the god kings around them. All of them wanted to approach Houston first, but none of them wanted someone else to be faster than them. Once they made it to the front, they would be faced with the merciless attacks of people beside or behind them. As a result, even though more than a dozen god kings were chasing an overgod, they were unable to catch up to him due to the interference from the people around them. The god artifact is mine. All of you piss off. Whoever gets in this king's way, this king will pay you a visit once this matter has concluded. The god kings all bellowed out furiously. Many of their eyes were bloodshot. Houston's god artifact made their hearts beat heavily as blood surged through their bodies. God artifacts were items that even many primordial realm experts did not possess. It tempted them greatly. Ahead, Houston constantly coughed up blood. After arriving in the central region, he originally wanted to find a remote location for cultivation. However, he had never thought he would come across a powerful beast in the wilderness, forcing him to use the Empyrean demon orb against it. It was also at this time that a passing god king discovered the Empyrean demon orb and became interested in it, forcing Houston to reveal the secret that he possessed a god artifact on him. Houston was not the opponent of a god king at all. If it were not for the Empyrean demon orb, he probably would not even have been able to escape. As a result, he used the Empyrean demon orb to flee. He was forced to use the Empyrean demon orb against the pursuit of a god king, or he would have ended up in his hands much earlier on. As a result, he was unable to store the Empyrean demon cult away and keep it hidden. This also resulted in the special presence of a god artifact that the Empyrean demon cult possessed to draw over even more god kings, which increased from the initial one to over a dozen now. Chapter 1989. Lord of Heaven's Link Peak. There's actually a god artifact here? At this moment, a deep voice boomed through the surroundings, echoing through the area, making it impossible to find its origins. A tremendous pressure that filled up the entire space there accompanied it. Just the pressure alone made Houston suddenly sink. He felt like he was suffocating. He struggled to breathe before the pressure. The pressure was just too terrifying to him. It was like a primordial beast, something that the God Kings behind him could not compare to. The expressions of the God Kings who fought against each other also changed drastically the moment the pressure appeared. They all could not help but stop. A middle-aged man had appeared silently close to Houston. The tremendous presence he gave off made it seem like he could destroy the surroundings just by raising his hand. At this moment, the middle-aged man was somewhat overjoyed. At the same time, he looked at the god artifact in Houston's hands with burning desire. He murmured, "Although it's a demonic god artifact, it's still a god artifact, and it seems to be of good quality." With that, the middle-aged man suddenly laughed aloud. Excitement filled his face evidently as he said, "Heaven really is smiling at me. I reached the primordial realm so many years ago, but I've never come into the possession of a god artifact. I never thought I'd come across one in such a remote place today. It looks like the heavens have blessed me. It looks like I'll have to disappoint you. The god artifact won't end up with you." At this moment, another voice rang out. A black-robed young man appeared near the middle-aged man. His face was cold, and his eyes were filled with an intense sense of viciousness, where people dared not to make eye contact with him. Haha. God artifacts are items that even many infinite primes don't possess. Since I've come across one, how can I miss it? Especially when it's a god artifact of quite a good quality. After the black-robed young man, an old man appeared. His face was covered with wrinkles, and he was hunchbacked, making him seem frail. The three people hovered in a triangular formation around Houston. The three of them did not even glance at the God Kings who were pursuing Houston before. Even Houston did not seem to exist in their eyes. All they could see was the Empyrean demon orb. There's only a single god artifact, but there are three of us. How will we split it? In the end, the old man chuckled. When he glanced past the Empyrean demon orb, he clearly desired it dearly from the gaze he showed. This god artifact will naturally end up with the capable, the black-robed young man said coldly. With that, he immediately appeared before Houston. He reached out with a hand, trapping down the region before him. He moved directly towards the Empyrean demon orb. When the young man moved, Houston felt his body tighten. The tremendous presence had completely immobilized him. Even with the Empyrean demon orb, he was still helpless against the young man. The young man was simply too powerful. In Houston's eyes, he seemed like the ruler of the world, so powerful that he was undefeatable. At the same time, the old man and the middle-aged man moved as well. They appeared beside Houston at basically the same time as the young man. They all reached towards the Empyrean demon orb. Terrifying pressure surged out, pressing down on Houston to the point where he even felt like his heart had stopped beating. Blood oozed out of all his pores. Before the three people, let alone escape, he was as insignificant as an ant even when he could use the Empyrean demon orb. Even though the Empyrean demon orb was an impressive god artifact, Houston was unable to unleash the might of a god artifact with his strength. In reality, even god kings would struggle to use a god artifact. Even if they received the recognition of the artifact's spirit, they would still be unable to unleash the might of the god artifact. Only primordial realm experts could use the destructive power of a god artifact as they wished. In this moment of life and death, a golden, three-legged cauldron suddenly appeared. It fell on Houston with lightning speed. Seeing this, the expressions of three people who had originally extended their hands toward the Empyrean demon orb changed slightly. They snorted coldly, and they sent a palm strike at the cauldron with devastating power. Boom! With a deafening sound, terrifying energy ripped through space such that the space around the cauldron cracked. The pitch-black fissures intersected with one another, expanding like a huge web. Terrifying pulses of energy ravaged the surroundings as a devastating storm, making the ground below shake. Mountains 100 kilometers away collapsed. Even the god kings nearby were forced into a constant retreat from the pulse of energy. Laws interwoven their surroundings as they resisted with their full strength. The golden cauldron shone brightly, giving off shocking energy pulses. It made the world pale in comparison. Moreover, the unique presence of a god artifact radiated from it. A god artifact. The eyes of the black-robed young man narrowed. He stared at the cauldron that had endured the strikes from the three of them, and became stern. Sir, you already have a god artifact. Are you unsatisfied with it, and you want to compete with us for this one? The old man growled. A white-robed young man hovered above the golden cauldron. He said emotionlessly, I am taking away this person. With that, the young man waved his hand, and the cauldron over Houston immediately shrank to the size of a fist, flying into the young man's hand. The young man directly left with it. Don't you go. The three infinite primes pursued him. However, they lost track of the young man very soon. Houston had been completely cut off from the outside world the moment the cauldron had surrounded him. At the same time, he lost all concept of time. He had been plunged into complete darkness. After some time, Houston felt his surroundings suddenly brighten. He discovered that he had arrived on a mountain. The origin energy in the surroundings was extremely abundant. It was to the point where it formed a mist. The Lord of the Peak wishes to see you. Come with me. At this moment, a voice rang out from behind Houston. The white-robed young man who had saved Houston studied him curiously as he spoke indifferently. Then he directly made his way to the mountain peak. Senior, where is this? Houston asked. He knew the young man was powerful. If the young man wanted to deal with him, he would not be able to escape no matter what. So he just followed the young man up the mountain. At the same time, he took out some healing pills and consumed them. Heaven's Link Peak. The young man spoke sparingly. After stating the location, he said nothing else. Houston directly ascended to the peak of the mountain behind the young man. At the moment, Houston was covered in blood. He arrived in a stone pavilion that stood near a cliff. A ruddy, sagely old man sat on a stone seat with his eyes closed. He did not move at all and was just like a statue. The young man stopped outside the pavilion and clasped his hands at the old man politely. He said, Lord, the person has been brought here. The old man slowly opened his eyes and glanced at Houston casually. However, at this moment his simple gaze seemed to change as well. The shards of time seemed to drift, the world seemed puny, and the universe seemed to evolve in his eyes. With that glance alone, he seemed to see Houston's past and future. Afterwards, he looked at the Empyrean demon orb and finally became stern. Houston, you do not need to worry. On the Heaven's Link Peak, you are very safe. No one can threaten you. For the next period of time, you should cultivate here in peace, the sagely old man said to Houston. He spoke gently. Houston clasped his hands at the old man and said, Thank you for saving me, Senior. May I know who you are and why you have saved me? Houston was very confused about this. The white-robed young man was already terrifyingly powerful, yet he had to bow to this old man. He just could not imagine how respected the ordinary-looking old man was. On the cloud plane, others call me the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak. There is no need for you to thank me for saving you. I am not saving you but all the lives in the world, said the Lord of the Peak. Saving all the lives in the world? Senior, may I ask you what you mean? Said Houston. His words had left Houston completely perplexed. The Lord of the Peak glanced at the Empyrean demon orb deeply and sighed gently. He said, Don't probe into this too much. You will understand in the future. With that, the Lord of the Peak allowed a young boy to take Houston away. Lord of the Peak, this disciple is very confused. He's just an overgod, so pitifully weak, so how is he connected to all the lives in the world? After Houston's departure, the white-robed young man who had saved him asked politely. He was also doubtful. The Lord of the Peak sighed gently. He gazed at the boundless sky, and his gaze became profound. He said, The demonic god artifact in his hands are related to great matters. Nothing can happen to it, or once that person comes, there will definitely be a storm of blood on the cloud plane. With that, the white-robed young man was startled. He asked, Who is he? Is he really that powerful? Moreover, apart from the Lord of the Peak yourself, our cloud plane has the Tian Empire and the various major organization. Is there still a need to fear this person? The Lord of the Peak nodded. Now that that person had been mentioned, he became very stern. He said, That person really is very powerful. In the current cloud plane there is no one who is his opponent. It's best if we don't provoke him. The young man was shocked. He knew exactly who the Lord of Heaven's Link Peak was. Yet he still feared this person so much. Who was he? The white-robed young man could not help but think of Houston again. He had never thought that the puny overgod the Lord of the Peak had asked him to save would be related to such a great matter. Chapter 1990. An agreement of 10,000 years. The two ancestral emperors of the Shi Empire, who had come from the northern region, Shi Haoshuan and Shi Haoming, were currently having a discussion with the two ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire. They conversed secretly through communication techniques. As such, aside from the four of them, no one else knew the contents of their negotiation, including the Shi Emperor, Shi Ziyun. However, the Shi Emperor did not care about their negotiation at all. He did not care about the process. He only wanted to know the outcome. If the outcome dissatisfied him, no one could stop what he would do. Even if two of the ancestral emperors of the Shi Empire were present, including his father. In the past, when he was still a prince, Shi Ziyun was refined and graceful. He was knowledgeable, skilled in both planning and scheming. He excelled in all aspects, earning his father's high regard. However, the Shi Ziyun of the past just happened to be a pacifist, showing no interest in the position of emperor at all. He had not even considered contending for the position. As a result, in the past, Shi Ziyun did not develop the power on his side like the other princes in the Shi Empire. He had always been alone as a prince, and he maintained an extremely low profile. However, the matters of the past had made him lose his daughter. And it was also from that moment onwards that he changed drastically. He stopped being a pacifist. For his daughter, he had almost become insane, wildly taking revenge on his enemies who had hunted him down and caused him to lose his daughter. This was more than enough to show just how important his daughter was to him. In the eyes of other emperors, the interests of the empire were supreme. They were willing to lose their children for the empire. However, Shi Ziyun was different. He was an emperor who could sacrifice the empire for his daughter. Now that he had finally found his long-lost daughter, he would certainly do everything for her. As the ancestral emperors of the two eternal empires negotiated with one another, the Shi Emperor and the Empress revolved around Shi Yu as they showed great concern for her. At that moment, they did not seem like an emperor and an empress at all. However, Shi Yu spoke sparingly when she was faced with the care and concern from the Shi Emperor and the Empress. She stared at them with extremely mixed feelings. Even she struggled to describe the emotions she was feeling. All of this had happened so suddenly. Just when the Tianyuan clan faced a great disaster, the parents she had never seen before actually appeared and completely overwhelmed the ninth prince. At the same time, they stood up against the ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire. All of this was like a dream to Shi Yu. It was as if she still had not completely accepted the dramatic developments from the bottom of her heart. It went without saying for the reactions of the people in the surroundings. They seemed to have turned into stone long ago. I never thought that Shi Yu of the Tianyuan clan would actually be the daughter of the emperor of the Shi Empire. Sang Tu, you should be glad you did not become enemies with the Tianyuan clan. Otherwise, the consequences would have been. The Divine King sighed as he communicated this to the ancestor of the Earth Spirit sect secretly. The ancestor of the Earth Spirit sect experienced angst. Only he understood the reason why he had let the Tianyuan clan go, even giving them a god king from his sect to settle the grievances between them. And it was not because of Jian Chen's talent. Instead, the woman in white had threatened him. Sang Tu feared her deeply, or even dreaded her due to her might. As a result, he had stepped down and dared not to target the Tianyuan clan anymore. If it had not been for the woman in white, Sang Tu would have never just let the matter be. After all, this affected the pride and prestige of his Earth Spirit sect. As a peak organization in the Heavenly Moon Empire, the Earth Spirit sect naturally needed to protect their pride. However, only after personally witnessing what had happened in the Tianyuan clan did Sang Tu realize just how clever of a decision settling his differences with the Tianyuan clan was. However, Sang Tu seemed to think of something very soon. His face immediately changed, and his forehead became covered with cold sweat. Great unease permeated his heart as well as endless regret. Suddenly, he remembered that the ninth prince had come to the Tian Yuan clan because of the information he had sent in the jade fragment. If the Shi Emperor looked into the matter, Sang Tu became unsettled when he thought of that. His heart was filled with fear. The fact that the princess of the Shi Empire had almost just died was directly related to him. I didn't leave my presence or name on the jade fragment. Moreover, the details recorded on there are already no secret. As long as I deny all claims no matter what, even the ninth prince won't have any evidence to prove that it was me. Sang Tu secretly made up his mind. At this moment, the negotiation between the two parties reached a conclusion. The two ancestral emperors of the Shi Empire arrived before the Shi Emperor. The emperor's father said, "Ziyun, the Blood Sun Empire is willing to compensate Yuer with the droplet of spiritual essence of starry skies and various heavenly resources. At the same time, Yuer can take an arm of the ninth prince. The matter will end like this." The other ancestral emperor added as well, "Ziyun, your father and I know that you are absolutely enraged. However, this matter hasn't developed into an unfixable mistake in the end. Moreover, the Blood Sun Empire is also an eternal empire. Their strength is roughly the same as ours. Let's just take their pride into consideration and not create a mess that can't be tidied up. It won't benefit our Shi Empire or their Blood Sun Empire at all if that happens." The benevolent face the Shi Emperor had shown to Shi Yu immediately sank when he heard that. A paramount presence radiated from him, and he said coldly, "No. No matter who it is, if they touch my daughter, I will make them pay with blood. If they want to protect the ninth prince, I will use my authority as emperor to declare war against the Blood Sun Empire." "You're messing around." Shi Haoshuan's face sank. He objected it greatly. Even Shi Haoming responded in a similar manner. In their eyes, the interest of the empire were everything. They could give up on their children for the sake of the empire, so how could they let the Shi Emperor do something as crazy as this? Shi Ziyun's face was cold. He said emotionlessly, "If that's the case, I will abdicate as emperor and cut off all ties with the Shi Empire. My wife and I can still avenge our daughter, without using the power of the Shi Empire." The expressions of Shi Haoshuan and Shi Haoming changed with that. Even the two ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire revealed rather ugly expressions. They could hear the determination in the Shi Emperor's voice. It was the type where he would never stop until he achieved his aim. "Shi Emperor, why don't we do this? We'll set a time frame of 10,000 years. With the talent of your esteemed princess and the nurturing of your Shi Empire, she'll definitely be able to become a god king in that time frame. After that, the ninth prince of our Blood Sun Empire can engage in a battle with your esteemed princess, and we can resolve all grievances through the fight. What do you think, Shi Emperor?" An ancestral emperor of the Blood Sun Empire suggested. In 10,000 years' time, your ninth prince will probably have reached the primordial realm already. Our Yuer is only an overgod right now. Even if she reaches God King in 10,000 years, how will she be the ninth prince's opponent? Someone who has been a god king for many years now. The Empress sneered. Chapter 1991. Shi Yu's departure. 1. The eyes of the Shi Emperor turned cold. He said frigidly, "You sure have done your calculations well. Let's just ignore how much longer your ninth prince has been cultivating for the time being. It was your ninth prince that injured our Yuer first. Yet now you propose a battle between Yuer and your ninth prince as a resolution? Does the life of my daughter pale in value to your ninth prince?" The Shi Emperor's face was extremely sunken. He was furious. After he had said that, he took a step forward, and his powerful presence as a chaotic prime radiated, blanketing the people from the Blood Sun Empire in an extremely brutal method. He growled, "Don't you even think about me agreeing to your joke of a match. If you don't hand over the ninth prince today, I'll make your Blood Sun Empire pay a price you can't afford." The two ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire fell silent. A presence that was no weaker than the Shi Emperors radiated from them, protecting their people. However, from their tightly furrowed brows, it was evident that the two ancestral emperors were internally conflicted. They were stuck in a dilemma. Although the Shi Emperor had only become a chaotic prime recently, such that the two ancestral emperors were more powerful than him in terms of cultivation, they really did not dare to become his enemy. However, they could not hand over the ninth prince either. They understood the Shi Emperor. Once they handed the ninth prince over, he would be dead for sure. They did not care about the lives of any of the princes in the empire. Instead, they cared about the humiliation it would bring to the Blood Sun Empire if the Shi Empire executed their ninth prince just like that. At the same time, if they executed the ninth prince over the matter, the Blood Sun Empire would still take a hit to their pride. After all, the Shi Emperor's daughter was completely fine now. She had just suffered some injuries earlier. If their Blood Sun Empire had to pay with the life of a prince, it would mean that their Blood Sun Empire was not as great as the Shi Empire. This matter was only the Shi Emperor taking revenge for his daughter. However, to the Blood Sun Empire, this was something important that related to their dignity and status. At this moment, Shi Yu said suddenly, "Okay, I accept your suggestion. I'll fight the ninth prince after 10,000 years. I will kill him personally during this match." There was evident killing intent directed towards the ninth prince in Shi Yu's voice. Don't be impulsive. Your father will decide for you." The Empress pulled Shi Yu's hand as she looked at her. The Shi Emperor also turned around to look at Shi Yu. He showed no intentions of condemning her. Instead, his gaze became filled with gentleness. He said, There's no need to wait for 10,000 years. Since the ninth prince has injured you, he won't be able to leave here today. You also can't agree to this match." Shi Yu shook her head. She stared at the ninth prince, who the Empress had slapped into a horrible shape, and said through gritted teeth, "I need to dish out this revenge personally. I want to kill him personally during a match." The Shi Emperor opened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but when he saw Shi Yu's determined gaze, he could only sigh helplessly. He could see Shi Yu's resolution through her eyes. If he continued to try to persuade her, not only would he fail to change her mind, but it might even lead to Shi Yu disliking him. Naturally, the Shi Emperor did not wish to see this. Just when the ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire had no idea what to do, they suddenly heard Shi Yu accept the match, and their eyes immediately lit up. One of them immediately said, "Since the esteemed princess has agreed to this, let's just leave it like this. Shi Emperor, what do you think?" The Shi Emperor was helpless. He did not fear the Blood Sun Empire, nor was he afraid of declaring war against the Blood Sun Empire. However, he needed to take his daughter's feelings into account. Since she had already decided, what else could he say? "I'll let the ninth prince live for another 10,000 years for now because of you. However, he may have avoided death, but he still deserves punishment." Towards the end, the Shi Emperor's eyes sharpened. He extended a finger towards the ninth prince from the distance, and a terrifying pulse of energy shot out and headed directly towards the ninth prince. Arg! The ninth prince produced a painful shriek. He directly fell out of the sky, and a bloody hole had appeared on his forehead. The Shi Emperor had injured his soul, and the power of laws from the Shi Emperor remained there. Not only would it make it difficult for him to recover from this injury, but it would also make it almost impossible for him to reach the primordial realm. Let's go. The two ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire were indifferent to this. They turned around to leave. Leave behind the spiritual essence of starry skies. The Shi Emperor called out. The spiritual essence of starry skies was good stuff. It would assist Shi Yu greatly. Even with his current strength, obtaining a drop of it was extremely difficult. One of the ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire paused. He tossed over the bottle that contained the spiritual essence of starry skies before leaving. The emperor of the Blood Sun Empire reached for the ninth prince with a sunken face. Without saying anything, he left with the infinite primes of the empire. In the blink of an eye, all the people from the Blood Sun Empire had departed. Shi Haoming and Shi Haoshuan did not remain for long after they had departed, leaving very soon as well. In the blink of an eye, the ancestral emperors of the Blood Sun Empire and the Shi Empire were completely gone. Only the Shi Emperor's group remained. Although the storm had blown over now, the shock brought onto the people of the Tian Yuan clan from the arrival of the two groups of peak experts was tremendous. Many of them had yet to return to their senses even now. It has been tough for you during these years. Come home with Mother. Mother will use the rest of her life to make it up to you." The Empress grasped Shi Yu's hands tightly while her face was filled with motherly love. The Shi Emperor put the bottle of spiritual essence of starry skies away, before turning around and looking at his daughter deeply. Although he did not say anything, he experienced warmth and happiness greater than he had ever felt in the past. 2,000 years. He had searched for 2,000 years, and he was finally reunited with his daughter today. This is my home. Shi Yu drew her hand back from the Empress, and she looked at the ruined Tianyuan clan. She spoke very softly. The Empress choked back sobs. Shi Yu's coldness broke her heart. Tears pooled up in her eyes, and they almost rolled down her cheeks. No matter what, I have to thank you. Thank you for saving our Tianyuan clan. Shi Yu took a few steps back slowly and bowed at the Empress and the Emperor deeply. The Empress finally broke into tears uncontrollably again from how Shi Yu acted, while the Shi Emperor sighed inside. He knew that his daughter was still unwilling to forgive them. However, since he had found his daughter now, he believed time could change her, that time could make her accept them. In the distance, the light in the Divine King's eyes flickered. He hesitated, and in the end he made up his mind. He stood forwards and clasped his hands. I am the Divine King of the Divine Kingdom of Pingtian. Greetings to the Shi Emperor and the Empress. After bowing towards the two of them, the Divine King looked at Shi Yu and became stern. He said, Your Highness, Jianqin currently faces the pursuit of the vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult, Huayan. His life is in danger. When she heard that Jianqin was being hunted down, Shi Yu's face changed drastically. At that moment, she had completely forgotten about her parents and the Shi Empire. The Divine King's words boomed through her head. Your Majesty, what did you say? The Patriarch is currently being hunted down by a vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult? Shi Yu arrived before the Divine King with a flash and asked him in disbelief. The Divine King nodded. Not long ago, Huayan brought 3 late God King protectors to deal with Jianqin. Although I kept Huayan busy, the 3 late God Kings pursued Jianqin. Although Jianqin is a supreme overgod, he's definitely not the opponent of the 3 late God Kings. It has already been quite some time since the 3 late God Kings pursued him. Also, now that Huayan is no longer entangled by me, he has traveled off in Jianqin's direction. With his speed, he has probably caught up already. Jianqin definitely can't escape, so he'll definitely die if nothing happens. Shi Yu immediately paled after receiving the confirmation. Chapter 1992. Shi Yu's departure, 2. The expressions of Sacred Feather, Rui Jin, Hong Lian, He Yu, and the others who had come up from the Tianyuan continent all changed. They knew without even thinking what the outcome would be when an overgod faced the pursuit of a primordial realm expert. On the other hand, the Shi Emperor's eyes lit up when he heard that. He said, Do you have an image of Jianqin and something that contains his presence? We do. The Patriarch's room and cultivation room should possess his residual presence, said Mo Ling. Afterwards, he led the Shi Emperor directly to where Jianqin stayed. The Shi Emperor was a supreme expert. In Jianqin's room, he was able to capture any residual presence without any effort. Afterwards, he immediately expanded the senses of his soul, blanketing the surroundings. Shi Yu stared at the Shi Emperor nervously. Even though she was unable to accept her parents who had appeared out of nowhere, only they could save Jianqin now. Very soon, the Shi Emperor retracted the senses of his soul. He looked at Shi Yu and said, I've discovered Huayan outside the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire, but he is injured. He was injured by people of the Blood Sun Empire. There are residual presences of Jianqin in the imperial capital, but he's not there. However, a spatial battleship took off recently. Jianqin's presence vanished at the spatial battleship's dock. If I've guessed correctly, he should have boarded the spatial battleship and left the cloud plane. Shi Yu and the other people of the Tianyuan clan finally felt relieved when they heard that Jianqin was fine. However, the Shi Emperor felt some pity. Originally, he wanted to mend his relationship with his daughter through saving Jianqin. It could help reduce the amount of repulsion his daughter felt towards him. However, he failed to find Jianqin. Jia Yun greets the Emperor, Empress, and Princess. Before long, a refined, middle-aged man in white robes arrived at the Tianyuan clan. He bowed towards the 3 of them politely. Jia Yun was the radiant god king that the Shi Emperor had summoned over from the Shi Empire. He had hurried over as quickly as he could through the teleportation formations. As soon as he arrived in the Tianyuan clan, he had learnt Shi Yu's identity from a primordial realm expert who had come with the Shi Emperor. Shi Yu immediately brought Jia Yun eagerly to where Mo Yen had died after learning he was a radiant god king. She asked frantically, "Senior, can you really revive Sister Mo Yen?" Jia Yun closed his eyes to sense the surroundings before smiling confidently. He clasped his fist at Shi Yu and said, "Although her body is destroyed, her soul has not dispersed. It still remains, so don't worry, Your Highness. Saving her won't be anything difficult." "Then I'll trouble Senior Jia Yun with saving Sister Mo Yen," Shi Yu was elated. "Yes, Your Highness." Jia Yun clasped his hands politely. Shi Yu was the only daughter of the Shi Emperor, so her status was naturally far greater than the past. Even though Jia Yun was a radiant god king, possessing a status greater than all other god kings in the Blood Sun Empire, he still needed to be polite to the Shi Emperor's only daughter. However, just when Jia Yun was about to revive Mo Yen, he suddenly paused. However, he returned to normal very soon. He said to Shi Yu, "Your Highness, to save this person, the process must be performed in the Shi Empire where I enter seclusion. There's a formation engraved there, making the radiant force extremely abundant. Only under those circumstances will success be certain. Moreover, when I condense the soul, there's a very high chance that she will lose her memory and forget the past. As a result, to ensure that Your Highness' sister retains her memory, I will need Your Highness to constantly call her name besides me, and use Your Highness' presence as a medium, so that the recovered soul won't lose any past memories." Jia Yun's expression was rather unnatural. Ever since he had started cultivating, this was the first time he had told such a lengthy lie. However, he felt extremely powerless, as the Shi Emperor had ordered him to trick the princess back to the Shi Empire no matter what method he had to use. As a result, he could only spin a lie like this. In reality, it would be nothing difficult to revive Mo Yen, whose soul remained intact with his abilities as a radiant god king. "All right. Let's go immediately." Shi Yu agreed without any hesitation. She did not understand the powers of radiant god kings at all. Naturally, she did not know that there was no need to venture to the Shi Empire to save Mo Yen with Jia Yun's level of cultivation. However, Jia Yun was her only hope of saving Mo Yen. Let alone the Shi Empire, Shi Yu would even wade through danger to save Mo Yen. "Let's not tarry and return right now. You don't have to worry about the Tianyuan clan. I will get someone to safeguard the place for now." The Shi Emperor beamed. He gave Jia Yun a glance of appreciation before immediately leaving the Tianyuan clan, with Shi Yu to return to the Shi Empire. As for the two old men who had come along, one of them remained in the Tianyuan clan. After the Shi Emperor had departed, the primordial realm experts of the Heavenly Moon Empire finally gained a chance to speak. Whether they were a part of the imperial family, were the ancestor of the Earth Spirit sect or Taoist sect of Calm Clouds, they all removed all haughtiness as primordial realm experts to express their goodwill towards the Tianyuan clan. All of them behaved extremely politely, leaving behind various resources before leaving. Huayan and his three god kings slowly flew through the air outside the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. Huayan's face was extremely sunken as terrifying killing intent flickered in his eyes from time to time. The three protectors behind him remained silent, following him in fear. The three of them knew that they had made the vice leader extremely furious since they had failed to stop Jianqun, allowing him to flee to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire and board the spatial battleship in the end. A chaotic prime's presence has appeared in the divine kingdom of Pingtian. I'll go check out the situation first before wiping out the Tianyuan clan along the way, thought Huayan. He directly flew towards the divine kingdom of Pingtian with the three god kings behind him. Jianqun stood by a window and gazed out of it blankly. Currently, he was in the huge cabin at the bottom of the spatial battleship. He stared at the huge piece of land that rapidly shrank. The spatial battleship accelerated. As it drew further and further away, the vast land was finally completely visible. This was the first time Jianqun had seen the cloud plane as a whole. The cloud plane was not spherical. Instead, it was a huge piece of land that floated in the sky. Land and sea occupied equal areas while the sea divided the entire piece of land into 5 regions. They formed the 5 major regions. Jianchen looked at the southern region, as if he wanted to find the Tian Yuan clan. Unfortunately, the Tian Yuan clan occupied just too small of a space with the entire southern region in perspective. He even struggled to find the territory of the divine kingdom of Pingtian from where he was. Just when Jianchen was in a daze, a long chime suddenly rang through the cabin. With it, a haughty voice rang out. Get to work, get to work. Quit staring at me. The ship has already entered outer space, so provide the ship with energy quickly. Don't laze around. You already know what happens if you're lazy, so I won't go into detail. Chapter 1993. The Swordswolf Adventurers. As the voice rang out, some of the people who were conversing leisurely around the cabin returned to their seats. They sat on their stone pedestal, and afterwards, they emitted powerful pulses of origin energy. At this moment, all the people in the cabin poured their origin energy into the stone pedestal. As they poured origin energy into the pedestals, Jianchen could clearly sense the speed of the ship suddenly increase. It moved faster and faster. In the end, he discovered that all the stars outside the ship were rapidly receding from the ship as streaks of light. The stars were not moving. Instead, it was simply the ship moving too quickly. The speed of the spatial battleship has probably surpassed infinite primes. Jianchen was secretly surprised by this. Then he looked at the people who poured origin energy into the stone pedestals as they sat there, and he returned to his position with some doubt. Next to Jianchen, Master Chanlong was pouring origin energy into his stone pedestal. When he saw Jianchen and Kaiya's confusion, he explained, I bought the tickets to the spatial battleship under tight conditions, and it was not cheap, so I only managed to get 3 low-class tickets. All the people in the low-class cabin need to pour origin energy into the stone pedestals every second day. The stone pedestals are linked to powerful formations. All the origin energy that enters the stone pedestal will be taken to the formation that powers the spatial battleship to be used as fuel. Master Chanlong looked at Jianchen and Kaiya, who still did nothing, and said with some helplessness, although the price of taking this low-class cabin is cheap, we have to provide energy for the spatial battleship's movement. This was a condition that came with the ticket. If we don't do this, our right to ride the spatial battleship will be revoked, and we will be thrown out. Can we upgrade our flight to a higher class? Jianchen asked. He did not have enough divine crystals to take a teleportation formation to a different plane, but he believed he could afford to fly at a higher class. After all, he had obtained a large amount of divine crystals from Yaxi Lian. As the commander of the 7th Army, Yaxi Lian was far richer than regular god kings. Even after he went on a shopping spree in the Xiandao Empire, he had only used up a small fraction of the divine crystals from Yaxi Lian's space ring. They're already full, so we can't upgrade even if we can afford it. We can only move up if the people in the other classes leave or die, said Chanlong. Jianchen nodded slightly before sitting down on the stone pedestal. He did not copy the other people by pouring his own energy into the stone pedestal. Instead, he removed a large number of thumb-sized high-grade divine crystals from his space ring. As soon as the divine crystals came in contact with the stone pedestal, the pure origin energy within would be drained away. Jianchen cultivated chaotic force. It was far more precious than the origin energy that other fighters cultivated. Naturally, he would not pour that into the stone pedestal. As a result, he would rather replace it with divine crystals than use up his own chaotic force. However, Jianchen's actions attracted the attention of everyone in the cabin. At that moment, everyone's attention was locked onto Jianchen. It was not that no one used divine crystals in place of their own origin energy. They were just extremely rare, and they would only use low-grade divine crystals. However, they had not even heard of a person who would directly use high-grade divine crystals like Jianchen. At that moment, a lot of people looked over enviously. Some of them were jealous. The divine crystals that Jianchen had taken out were quite a large sum to many of the people present. What an idiot! He's using high-grade divine crystals in place of his own origin energy. I'd like to see how long he can last. I'm certain that he won't even be able to last for 3 days. As time goes on, Even God Kings can't afford to burn high-grade divine crystals like that. A few people discussed softly, but naturally Jianchen heard all of it. Jianchen did not speak up about this. However, he also felt very helpless because apart from high-grade divine crystals, he only had supreme-grade divine crystals in his space ring. Moreover, he did not have many loose pieces of divine crystals. Basically, all of them were blocks. In the blink of an eye, the spatial battleship had already flown through outer space for close to a month. Jianchen used high-grade divine crystals continuously during that time to replace his own energy. He had used up several tens of thousand divine crystals. The people who believed that Jianchen would not be able to last long gradually changed their minds after they saw how Jianchen had used several tens of thousand high-grade divine crystals in the span of less than a month. Greed and burning desire appeared in their gazes towards Jianchen. People who treated several tens of thousand high-grade divine crystals like nothing clearly possessed an extremely large sum of divine crystals. One day consumes over 2,000 high-grade divine crystals. I need to spend half a month each month pouring in energy, so a month should consume between 30 to 40,000 high-grade divine crystals. That's close to 500,000 in a year and 1,000,000 in 2 years, which is a block of high-grade divine crystal. Jianchen calculated his expenses. Burning through a single block of high-grade divine crystal every 2 years was nothing to him right now, because let alone high-grade divine crystals, just the supreme-grade divine crystals he possessed amounted to several dozen blocks. A single block of supreme-grade divine crystal could be converted into 100 blocks of high-grade divine crystal. At this moment, 7 people in tight black robes appeared before Jianchen. They surrounded him and a middle-aged man smiled. "Brother, may I ask you where you come from and which sect you come from?" Jianchen had already sensed their intentions. He could tell from their almost identical attires that they probably belonged to the same organization. In the spatial battleship, there were over 30 other people in the same attires apart from the 7 of them. However, the 7 people around him right now were the stronger ones. They were all over gods. The other people in similar attires were below over god. "I am just a wanderer. I have no sect or master. There's no need for me to mention my name. It's not worth remembering," said Jianchen calmly as he remained seated on the stone pedestal. Now that he had left the cloud plane, he was indeed a wanderer. Master Chanlong and Kaya opened their eyes at that moment as well, staring at the 7 people coldly. The 7 men naturally sensed that Jianchen was with Chanlong and Kaya. However, they did not mind at all. After they learned that Jianchen was only an independent cultivator, the eyes of the middle-aged man who had spoken earlier lit up. He said, "We're the Swordswolf adventurers. The captain and the 2 elders are currently at the high-class cabin, and they're all god kings. Brother, would you be interested in joining our group? Although we're not a peak organizations, we're still one with 3 god kings. Would you be interested?" As they said that, a pressure radiated from the 7 of them, slowly approaching Jianchen. Although the middle-aged man had spoken rather politely, the forcefulness in his words was evident. He was basically threatening Jianchen. Chapter 1994. Arena of Life and Death. Once you join us, I have countless methods to kill you. At that time, it doesn't matter how many divine crystals you have on you. It'll all be mine. The middle-aged man sneered secretly. Naturally, he had come for Jianchen's divine crystals. Seeing how Jianchen treated the high-grade divine crystals like nothing, he knew that Jianchen was extremely wealthy, having probably obtained it all through luck. As for Chanlong and Kaya, who were with Jianchen, the middle-aged man did not take them seriously at all even though they were overgods and no weaker than any of his companions. This was because they were the Swordswolf adventurers. They had 3 god kings, and aside from that, his brothers who had stood forward with him were no ordinary people either. They possessed a combination attack that basically made them invincible below god kings when used. Even against opponents who outnumbered them, they would be able to emerge victoriously. "I have no interest," Jianchen said extremely calmly. Even though he knew the Swordswolf adventurers possessed 3 god kings, he did not care at all. As long as he did not encounter late god kings, they would not be able to pose too great of a threat to him. Moreover, late god kings would not just appear this easily. Moreover, he had already learnt from Chanlong that fighting was prohibited on the spatial battleship, so it did not matter even if the Swordswolf adventurers possessed late god kings. The rules of the spatial battleship still bound them, preventing them from fighting. The middle-aged seemed to have expected Jian Chen's declination. His face did not change, and he said, "Our Swordswolf adventurers possesses some fame and prestige. We're a group of rather powerful adventurers. Sir, are you turning down our invitation because you're looking down on us? Any person who looks down on our Swordswolf adventures will suffer horrible consequences. Brother, you better consider it well." From behind, a gloomy young man who seemed to be approaching his 30s said gruffly. There was a vague sense of killing intent. "Aren't you going overboard? We don't want to join, so you assume it to be looking down on you. Do all the people you want to join have to join?" Kaya stood up and said furiously, "Haha, that's right. Our Swordswolf adventurers just likes going overboard, so what?" The young man sneered. He stared at Kaya and scoffed, "But you don't have to worry, girl. Not anyone can join our Swordswolf adventurers. Your cultivation is just barely enough, but your appearance." The young man sighed when he reached there. Sigh, after spending some time in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire of the southern region of the Cloud Plain, I have seen plenty of beautiful women. It has taken my taste to a whole new level. Now that I've seen your appearance, I really can't let you join us because the women we had fun with in the brothels of the imperial capital were hundreds of times prettier than you. If I let you join us, our Swordswolf adventurers will probably be completely humiliated. Hahaha, that's right. Our Swordswolf adventurers is a group with some fame after all. We can't just let an extremely ugly woman join. Otherwise, we won't be able to show ourselves in the future. Woman, quit staring at us. You won't get invited even if you stare at us like that because your face really makes us troubled." The people of the Swordswolf adventurers laughed aloud. Gradually, the topic of the conversation began to revolve around Kaya. They scoffed and scorned her as they pleased. Kaya paled in fury. She was a woman before being an over-god. Since most women cared about their appearance, the scathing words of the Swordswolf adventurers made her extremely furious. Indeed, Kaya's beauty was not breathtaking. She could not compete with Fairy Haoyu, Shangguan Mu'er, and so on. Even the two princesses of the Xiandao Empire, Xinger and Lan'er, were prettier than her. However, she was still pretty, nowhere near as bad as the people from the Swordswolf adventurers had described. Seeing the Swordsworth adventurers humiliate Kaya, Jianchen experienced heavy killing intent. He turned towards Chanlong emotionlessly and asked, "Master Chanlong, is there any way to kill them?" Master Chanlong's face was ugly as well. The vague sense of familiarity he felt from Kaya had already made him treat her as his best friend. Now that his best friend was being harassed, he also experienced killing intent. There's an arena of life and death set up on the spatial battleship. There are no rules there. As such, once you enter it, you can kill to your heart's content without breaking any rules of the spatial battleship, said Master Chanlong. He seemed to know what Jianchen wanted to do, so he stood up from his stone pedestal. Jianchen stared at the Swordswolf adventurers and said emotionlessly, "Haven't you deliberately come to provoke us for my space ring? I can give you a chance to obtain all my wealth. In the arena of life and death, if you can kill me, then Jianchen directly took out a block of supreme-grade divine crystal and tossed it onto the ground when he reached there. He continued, "Then all my wealth and my space ring belongs to you. This block of supreme-grade divine crystal is only a portion of it. I just wonder whether you have the courage to come get it or not." The block of supreme-grade divine crystal was placed before Jianchen. The huge crystal was transparent, and it shone with a dense, hazy light. Pure origin energy pulsed, causing all the people in the cabin to become green with envy. They all stared right at the block of divine crystal. This was a block of supreme-grade divine crystal, 1 meter in length, width and depth. Let alone supreme grade, many people in the cabin had not even seen a high-grade divine crystal the size of this. All the people from the Swordswolf adventurers stared at the block of supreme-grade divine crystal as well. Desire filled their eyes. They knew that Kaya and Jianchen were together, which was why they made fun of Kaya to aggravate Jianchen, forcing him into the arena of life and death. They had never thought they would achieve their goals so easily. We accept your challenge. Let's go to the arena of life and death. The Swordswolf adventurers agreed without hesitation. Even though there were people amongst them that could already sense that something was off, they ignored it very quickly before the temptations of supreme quality divine crystals. Although they could not tell Jian Chen's level of cultivation, they knew he was not a god king from his presence alone. They had no need to fear as long as they did not encounter god kings. Moreover, even if he were a god king, it did not matter. There were no rules in the arena of life and death. If the 7 of them combined their strength, they could remain tangled with god kings for a while through their various techniques. That time would be enough for their captain to arrive. Jianchen, Kaya, and Chanlong set off for the arena of life and death with the 7 overgods. Behind them were the several dozen members of the Swordswolf adventurers below overgod. After they had left, the remaining people in the cabin hesitated before quite a few people followed them away as well. They had gone to watch. At the same time, in a luxurious room filled with origin energy within the high-class cabins of the spatial battleship, a scarred, muscular man in tight, red robes sat on a jade bed. He was the captain of the Swordswolf adventurers, known by others as the Wolf King. Suddenly, the man's face changed, and he slowly opened his eyes. He took out a jade talisman from his space ring, and scanned it with the senses of his soul. Qing Fan and the others have caught a big fish in the low-class cabin. He actually holds a block of supreme-grade divine crystal at the very least, and he is already in the arena of life and death. Yes, that's a big fish indeed. Qing Fan and the others have done well. I gotta properly reward them later. The Wolf King was elated. Even to him, a God King, a block of supreme-grade divine crystal was wealth that he could not ignore. However, the Wolf King furrowed his brows soon after. He murmured, "Not only does the target hold a block of supreme-grade divine crystal at the very least, but he's not afraid of the challenge either. It looks like he might be a difficult target. I have to go have a look, just in case the big fish escapes." The Wolf King immediately left the room. He summoned the other 2 god kings of the Swordswolf adventurers, and went to the arena of life and death together with them. The arena of life and death was located in the central region of the spatial battleship. This was also the busiest and most prosperous area of the entire ship. Shops, food, and entertainment all gathered here, making it seem like a miniature, bustling city. The arena of life and death was located in the central region of the spatial battleship. This was also the busiest and most prosperous area of the entire ship. Shops, food, and entertainment all gathered here, making it seem like a miniature, bustling city. Not only was there free trade here for various cultivation methods, battle skills, treasures, and so on, but there was also delicious food made from the meat of various huge space beasts. It would draw in a large number of diners every day. Jianchen, Kaya, and Chanlong made their way through the bustling region of trade with the people from the Swordswolf adventurers. They headed directly towards the arena of life and death. The arena of life and death was a circular platform that was 1,000 meters wide. A barrier surrounded the entire place, and it was so powerful that even god kings would struggle to make it tremble. As soon as they arrived here, the gloomy young man who had mocked Kaya directly leapt onto the platform. As for the 6 other overgods of the Swordswolf adventurers, they surrounded Jianchen, Kaya, and Chanlong to cut off their path of retreat. They wanted to prevent them from running away suddenly. "I'm already in the arena of life and death. Brat, weren't you pretty arrogant earlier? You boasted that you would kill us. Now that your opportunity is right before you, come in here." The gloomy young man stood in the arena as he stared at Jianchen in provocation. "The 3 of you are already here. Surely, you're not considering to flee now? Haha, you haven't been frightened by our Swordswolf adventurers, right? Look at the 3 of them. You can tell with a single glance that they're cowards." The 6 people who surrounded Jianchen and the others all scoffed. From how nervous they seemed, they appeared to be afraid that Jianchen really would flee now. They did not pay any attention to Kaya and Chanlong. Their main target was only Jianchen. A cold light and killing intent flickered through Jianchen's eyes as he listened to the various remarks from the people. With a gentle leap, he took to the air and passed through the barrier around the arena of life and death with no obstruction. He stood in the arena now. There were no restrictions on the people who used the arena of life and death in the spatial battleship. It did not matter if people were fighting in it already, as people could enter from outside whenever they wished to engage in a deathmatch with their opponents. Once the deathmatch began, it would continue until someone died. Only those victorious could leave the arena alive. Defeat meant death. Seeing how Jianchen had really entered the arena of life and death, the eyes of the Swordswolf adventurers lit up. They were elated. Once he had entered the arena of life and death, it would mean that the deathmatch had begun. Unless he was victorious, he could not leave. Haha, sir. You really are impressive. The people of the Swordswolf adventurers laughed aloud. Afterwards, the 6 other overgod leapt into the arena as well. They had never even considered fighting Jianchen alone. They were already prepared to rush him together once Jianchen entered the arena of life and death. They would surround him until he died. Once Jianchen died in the arena, all his wealth would become theirs. Jianchen, leave that person to me. I want to teach him a lesson personally, Kaya said to Jianchen secretly. She and Master Chanlong had entered the arena together. She glared at the young man who had scoffed at her before, and killing intent surged out. People had already begun to gather around the arena gradually. They pointed at the people in the arena and conversed softly. As it was 7 against 3, many people felt the odds were against Jianchen and his group. The Swordswolf adventurers were quite famous here. Many people knew they possessed a combined attack, allowing them to defeat people more powerful than them. Moreover, these people were not all the Swordswolf adventurers. There were 3 god kings who supported them. Although this type of organization was nowhere close to the apex, it was considered quite powerful on the spatial battleship. Spirit and body fusion. It was also at this moment that the people from the Swordswolf adventurers began to move. They yelled out together, and the 7 overgods fell into specific positions as quickly as they could. They were prepared to use their combined attack. Once we use the technique, those 3 people are dead for sure. Even if we're unlucky, and we come across a supreme overgod who is on the overgod's plaque, we'll be able to fend them off. All we need to do is keep them busy until the captain makes it here. By then, even supreme overgods will be doomed. That block of supreme grade divine crystal belongs to our Swordswolf adventurers. And I heard that the kiddo seems to have more than that. Ha ha ha, we've struck big money. The 7 overgods were excited inside, as if all of Jianchen's wealth was already theirs. Just as they dreamed about just how many supreme grade divine crystals they were about to obtain, a terrifying presence filled with destruction suddenly appeared. Kaya reached out with her right hand, and a sword immediately condensed out of purely the laws of destruction. It produced a terrifying presence before turning into a black streak of light, shooting towards the young man who had insulted her earlier with lightning speed. Although Kaya had only grasped the power of laws recently, she had mastered its usage. Her usage even surpassed Jianchen's usage of the laws of the sword. No one could match up to her. As a result, not only was it a piece of cake for her to use the laws of destruction like it was second nature, but the power of all the laws she used, whether it was the laws of fire, laws of destruction, or laws of creation, was extremely pure, without any contaminants at all. Their power had completely exceeded the same laws from any cultivator at the same level. The laws of destruction moved extremely quickly. In the tiny space of the arena, it was basically instantaneous. With a flash, the laws of destruction had approached the young man. Bang! With that, the laws of destruction had already pierced the young man's head before he could react, and it exploded right after. It blasted the young man's head to pieces as red and white matter flew everywhere. Before they could even use their combined attack, one of them had already died. Clearly, this had surprised all of them, causing them to tarry slightly. They all looked at the headless corpse of the young man as disbelief filled their faces. Just a single strike had claimed the life of one of their companions. Just what was this strength? Everyone looked at Kaya as they were absolutely astounded. Only now did they realize just how terrifying of a person they had provoked. She had managed to kill one of their companions with the first strike, and they were unable to react at all. Even most of the supreme overgods on the overgod's plaque were not able to do something like that. Just as they were stunned, the clear thrum of a sword rang out. Jianchen had arrived before them as a blur with the startling rainbow sword, stabbing out with lightning speed. Spurt. Faced with Jianchen's attack, they were unable to block at all. Just that one strike pierced the head of one of them. Jianchen had killed one of their companions with lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the 7 confident overgods of the Swordswolf adventurers had already died. They had been slain in a single strike by Kaya and Jianchen. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the 7 confident overgods of the Swordswolf adventurers had already died. They had been slain in a single strike by Kaya and Jianchen. The people of the Swordswolf adventurers were not the only ones shocked. Even the observers below were dumbfounded. Retreat. The 5 remaining people paled in fright. Now that they could not use their combined attack, they retreated as quickly as they could. Jianchen charged up. The startling rainbow sword turned into a blur as he stabbed towards a second person. Jianchen's strike was just too fast. It had surpassed the speed that the naked eye could capture. Although the overgods could sense it with their soul, they were powerless against it. Spurt. Jianchen's sword directly plunged into the head of a second overgod. In less than a few seconds, Jianchen had already claimed the life of 2 overgods. At the same time, Kaya had caught up as well. With a wave of her hand, the laws of destruction condensed, and she struck out without any mercy at all. Her palm strike struck a person's head and terrifying laws of destruction surged. It directly dispersed his soul and cracked his head. Even though Jianchen and his group faced the Swordswolf adventurers 3 against 7 in the arena of life and death, their strengths were on completely different levels. Even though there were 2 late overgods among the 7 of them, they were regular late overgods at most, let alone the difference from supreme overgods. But even the prodigies of some large sects were far more powerful than them. As a result, the battle was one-sided, or more correctly, it was not a battle, but a one-sided slaughter. Instantly, only the middle-aged man who had approached Jianchen first remained among the 7 of them. The middle-aged man was called Qingfan. Even though he was a late overgod, making him one of the most powerful among the 7, he could not help but pale in fright when he faced Jianchen and Kaya right now. Chills ran down his spine while his forehead had already become covered with a thin layer of sweat. Out of the 7 overgods, only he remained in the blink of an eye. Just who did they provoke? Right now, Qingfan was filled with regret. Don't kill me, don't kill me. Brother, it was my wrong earlier. I, Qingfan, will apologize to you right here and make it up to you. I hope you can be the bigger man and spare my life. Qingfan basically begged with a trembling voice. Spare your life. Jianchen sneered. He glared at Qingfan and said, Isn't your Swordswolf adventurers pretty powerful? Provoking us purposefully and forcing us into the arena of life and death. We're standing in the arena of life and death now, so why are you begging for forgiveness now? Don't get cocky because the people begging for forgiveness will become you very soon. At this moment, a growl filled with killing intent rang out. The scarred captain of the Swordswolf adventurers, the Wolf King, had arrived at the arena of life and death with his 2 other god kings. The 3 of them seemed to be striding along steadily, but they would cross hundreds of meters with each step. With just a few steps, the 3 of them directly passed through the barrier and arrived in the arena. Once they had entered the arena of life and death, it would mean a death match had begun. No one could leave until victory was decided. Captain. Qingfan's eyes immediately lit up with the Wolf King's arrival. It was as if he saw a bright lantern in the dark night, gaining hope and confidence. As the attention of Jianchen, Kaya, and Master Chanlong was drawn towards the Wolf King, a vicious light flickered through Qingfan's eyes. He silently took out a dagger and stabbed it towards Jianchen's heart. The dagger flickered with a gloomy blue light. It gave off an icy cold presence, which was enough to cause people to feel chills. It had been covered with an extremely powerful poison. Qingfan's sneak attack was unexpectedly successful. The dagger directly pierced through Jianchen's clothes, and the sharp blade landed on Jianchen's chest. Qingfan was secretly overjoyed when he saw that his sneak attack had succeeded. However, his face froze very soon as he stared at Jianchen's chest with widened eyes. Disbelief filled his face. Although his dagger had stabbed at Jianchen's chest, It did not penetrate anything. It did not even make it through his skin. In particular, the great resistance he felt in his right hand was like he had stabbed at a steel wall instead. How is this possible? Qing Fan was extremely shocked inside. Jian Chen had blocked his sneak attack with his body alone. He had never seen or even heard of such a powerful body before. However, before Qing Fan could think too much about it, a streak of light rapidly expanded in his eyes. A strand of sword chi shot out from Jian Chen's hand, piercing Qing Fan's forehead. Stop! The Wolf King cried out furiously from nearby. He had already charged over as a blur in an attempt to save Qing Fan from Jian Chen. However, he was too late. The sword chi from Jian Chen's hand directly left behind a bloody hole in Qing Fan's forehead. It had entered his soul and wiped it out on the spot. The Wolf King howled out angrily, and his pupils became silver white. The presence from him surged as he charged at Jian Chen murderously. His right hand turned into a claw as the laws of a god king descended. He swung it at Jian Chen's head mercilessly. During all that, his 5 fingers had silently turned into 5 claws that shone with cold light. Jian Chen's face did not change. He remained calm and composed. He formed a seal with his hand, and a golden strand of sword chi condensed. It shot off as a dazzling streak of light. Boom! With a heavy sound, the sword chi collided with the claws of the Wolf King, making his body tremble. He staggered backwards uncontrollably as a vicious slash appeared on his right hand. It left behind a white mark on his 5 long claws. Since you've already entered the arena of life and death, only the victorious can leave, Jian Chen said coldly. He took a step out and appeared before the Wolf King like he had teleported. He slashed the startling rainbow sword to prevent the Wolf King from escaping. I never thought I'd meet a supreme overgod here. The Wolf King was stern. He held out, and his body rapidly swelled at the same time. In the blink of an eye, he had turned into a silver-white wolf that was 10 meters in length. 9 bone-like swords stood on the wolf's back. They shone with cold light as they pulsed with powerful energy. The captain of the Swordswolf adventurers was not a human. He was a Swordswolf. Moreover, now that the captain had reverted to his original form, his presence had clearly become stronger. Including the captain, there were a total of 3 god kings among the Swordwolf adventurers. Just when the captain started fighting Jian Chen, the 2 other god kings struck out as well. Including the captain, there were a total of 3 god kings among the Swordwolf adventurers. Just when the captain started fighting Jian Chen, the 2 other god kings struck out as well. Naturally, Kaya and Chanlong would not watch on idly. They struck out as well, keeping a god king busy each. Although Kaya was only an overgod, and she had only reached godhood recently, her battle prowess was no worse than Jian Chen's. Her control and usage of laws even amazed Jian Chen. As a result, as soon as Kaya began fighting the god king, she was equally matched with him, and she even gained the upper hand from time to time. The 3 god kings of the Swordswolf adventurers were not particularly powerful. They were no prodigies, and they were all just early god kings. As a result, when Jian Chen and Kaya faced off against them, it was different from when they were being hunted down by the 3 protectors of the Empyrean demon cult. At that time they basically could not fight back at all. Compared to Jian Chen and Kaya's ease, Master Chanlong suffered much more. He had completely lost the upper hand. If it were not for the assistance from the soul trapped in the formation banners, which had materialized into a giant python, Master Chanlong probably would have become heavily injured just from the God King's attacks. After all, he was a formations master. He specialized in casting down formations and attacking people like that. Master Chanlong held a simple, azure disc. He worked with the trapped soul against the God King as his hands constantly changed between seals. He tossed out formation banners one after another to cast down formations as quickly as possible. In an open battle, Master Chanlong would probably struggle to defeat opponents of the same cultivation realm, but if he could cast down his formations, he could kill God Kings easily. As they fought in the arena of life and death, violent booms rang out constantly. Powerful pulses of energy ravaged the arena, surprising many of the people who had gathered around it. As the news that God Kings were fighting in the arena of life and death spread, more and more people gathered around it. However, without any exception, all the observing people were stunned and shocked. 3 overgods were fighting against 3 god kings, and 2 of them were even equally matched with their god king opponents, seemingly gaining the upper hand from time to time. This sight brought unimaginable shock to all the people watching. To be able to fend off god kings as overgods, the 3 of them must be supreme overgods from the overgods plaque. The young man and woman are especially impressive. I even suspect them to be ranked first on the overgods plaque. We don't know just how powerful the person ranked first is, but I am confident that the young man and woman are ranked within the top 10, no, the top 3. Many people were amazed as they sighed in surprise around the arena. At this moment, a great wolf howl rang out. The Wolf King and Jian Chen's battle had reached a level of great intensity. The Wolf King was already doused in blood. Vicious slashes covered his body, and out of the 9 bone swords on his back, only 6 remained. Jian Chen had cut off 3. However, Jian Chen's clothes were torn as well and splashed with blood. It was no longer possible to distinguish whether the blood was his or the Wolf King's. At this moment, at the very top of the spatial battleship, 3 old men sat within a well-decorated room. The 3 old men seemed extremely simple. Their presences were concealed, making them seem like ordinary people. However, their eyes were extraordinary. Their simple-looking pupils would become as vast and profound as the universe from time to time. 3 overgods against 3 god kings. Hehehe, this is extremely rare. I never thought that something as interesting as this would happen on our spatial battleship, the Sunlit Dawn. A white-robed, ruddy old man chuckled. Beside the white-robed old man, there was another wrinkly old man in linen robes. He nodded in agreement and sighed in amazement. Just the 3 overgods that they've encountered randomly are actually so powerful. Not only does that woman's usage of the laws of destruction and laws of fire make me admire her in particular, but the young man who uses the sword is extremely outstanding as well. I wonder what cultivation method he practices. I can sense a brutal power different from the laws of destruction from him. As for that old man, although there's nothing outstanding about him, the formations he casts down are extremely impressive. Sigh, it has been quite a long time since I've moved around in the world. Are all the juniors of this generation this impressive? Not all of them are this outstanding. There just happens to be a few of them together, said the last old man in red robes. He was the old man who had repelled Huaiyan for Jianchen and destroyed one of Huaiyan's arms. Hehehe, it's quite rare to see such a fascinating show where 3 overgods fight 3 god kings at the same time. Hong Mo Muhi, if we don't have some fun when there's something so interesting going on, it'll be too great of a pity. Why don't we have a bet? The white-robed, ruddy old man chuckled. He continued, they seem to be some Swordswolf adventurers. Out of the 3 god kings, only the Swordswolf is barely eye-catching. He possesses a shred of the bloodline of the ancient Skywolf. In particular, his last bone sword has condensed a sliver of the bloodline's power. As a result, once it erupts, he'll be able to kill almost all early god kings. Only those prodigies can stop it. Let's bet on who will emerge victorious between the Swordswolf and the kiddo with the sword. Do we still need to gamble? The young man with the sword matches the Swordswolf evenly and gains the upper hand from time to time, but that's only because the Swordswolf hasn't used the power of his bloodline. Once he uses that, even if the kid survives, he'll be left half alive. Of course, that's given that the woman with the laws of fire and destruction and the old man with the formations don't provide assistance. The wrinkly Muhi in linen robes shot a glance over, and said in some displeasure. The red-robed old man who had saved Jianchen, Hong Mo, smiled faintly. He said, since the battle is still ongoing, we naturally don't know who will win. Let's bet. Let's see who will win. I'll isolate the 3 of them so that they can't work together against the Swordswolf. Please place your bets. I'll bet a piece of true metal of Buddha on the Swordswolf. I'll bet a first-grade god tier healing pill on the Swordswolf as well. The 2 old men placed their bets very soon. They both chose the Swordswolf. Hong Mo smiled faintly and said, since you've both chosen the Swordswolf, I naturally can't copy you. I choose the young man with the sword. I'll bet that he will win. Ha! Hong Mo, it's your loss for sure this time. That sliver of power from the bloodline of the ancient Skywolf cannot be underestimated. The power from the bloodline of the ancient Skywolf is indeed very powerful. Except the power condensed in the ninth bone sword is only a sliver of it. If he uses it well, he can indeed claim to be invincible among his cultivation level. However, if he doesn't, Hong Emo smiled profoundly. The powerful senses of his soul had already enveloped the entire arena of life and death. He was already paying close attention to Jianchen and the Swordswolf. The power from the bloodline of the ancient Skywolf is indeed very powerful. Except the power condensed in the ninth bone sword is only a sliver of it. If he uses it well, he can indeed claim to be invincible among his cultivation level. However, if he doesn't, Hong Emo smiled profoundly. The powerful senses of his soul had already enveloped the entire arena of life and death. He was already paying close attention to Jianchen and the Swordswolf. It looks like the Swordswolf isn't in Hong Mo's favor. Since that's the case, let's just see. I refuse to believe that a God King Swordswolf with the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline will lose to an overgod. The battle between Jianchen and the Wolf King grew more and more intense in the arena of life and death. They had already become blurs. They clashed so quickly that many overgods were unable to see their figures. They could only grasp them through the senses of their souls. It had to be mentioned that the Wolf King was very powerful. Although Jianchen had already fought with several early God Kings in the past, they paled in comparison to the Wolf King in terms of battle experience. As the captain of a group of adventurers, the Wolf King had experienced far more battles and life-or-death situations than many disciples of large sections. Coupled with the Wolf King's special bloodline and his body as a magical beast, he possessed battle prowess that exceeded most human God Kings. In the end, it led to the battle between Jianchen and the Wolf King being especially difficult. At this moment, an extremely powerful pulse of energy appeared in the arena of life and death. 5 of the 6 remaining bone swords on the Wolf King's back suddenly shone with a silver-white light. Extremely violent energy filled each bone sword as they stabbed out suddenly with lightning speed. Jianchen's eyes narrowed. With a long whistle, he formed a fist with his left hand and struck out with the laws of the sword and chaotic force to stop the bone sword that shot towards his forehead. Immediately, blood splashed, and his left hand was reduced to a mess. The bones in his hand had basically all shattered. The 4 remaining bone swords emitted surging pulses as they extended over as blurs, arriving before Jianchen instantly. Jianchen did not try to dodge the 4 bone swords. Determination flooded his eyes. He charged up in a straight posture and directly allowed his body to be hit. The startling rainbow sword in his right hand shone brightly as he cleaved it towards the Wolf King's head with lightning speed. Jianchen wanted to trade attacks. The Wolf King clearly understood Jianchen's intentions. Craziness appeared in his eyes as well. He was ready to trade blows too. Spurt, 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 spurt. The 4 bone swords passed through Jianchen's body at basically the same time. The white bones emerged from Jianchen's back. Now they were dyed red. Blood dripped from them, where each droplet pulsed with powerful energy. However, Jianchen did not even let out a grunt. Blood dripped down from the corner of his lips, as the sword in his right hand stabbed towards the Wolf King's forehead with lightning speed. Like a flash of light, it arrived before the Wolf King's forehead in a split second. At this critical moment, the Wolf King twisted his head slightly, dodging Jianchen's fatal strike. In the end, the strike stabbed his neck. The stream of sword chi almost severed the Wolf King's head, only leaving a flap of skin that kept it together. It was also this moment that Jianchen suddenly froze. The 4 bone swords in his body suddenly erupted with power, as if they wanted to tear his body to pieces. Blood gushed out from his wounds. Chaotic force circulated through Jianchen. He pushed the defenses of the chaotic body to the limit to endure this power from the bone swords as he swung the startling rainbow sword at the Wolf King's back. Ding! With that sound, the 5 other bone swords on the Wolf King's back were all severed. 8 of the 9 bone swords were broken now. Only 1 remained. Jianchen struck out extremely quickly. After breaking the 5 bone swords, the startling rainbow sword turned into a blur once again as he cleaved at the Wolf King's head. Killing me won't be that easy. Let alone you, a mere overgod. Even if you become a God King, you won't be able to kill me because I have the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. It will be your honor to die to this power, At this moment, the Wolf King's voice rang out. The voice was filled with deep resentment. The Wolf King needed to pay an extremely heavy price and lose much of his vitality to use the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. He had never thought a mere overgod would force him to a point like this. However, he had no choice. This overgod was just too great. He even suspected that the supreme overgod ranked first on the overgod's plaque would not have an easy battle against him. With that, a force of destruction so powerful that it frightened even Jianchen suddenly appeared. The ninth bone sword on the Wolf King's back suddenly shone with dazzling red light. The terrifying power slumbering in there suddenly awakened. Jianchen stared at the Wolf King's ninth bone sword, and he became extremely stern. He felt the presence of death from the ninth bone sword. The power that had awakened within it startled him. However, in the next moment, Jianchen gritted his teeth and continued what he was doing. He stabbed his sword towards the Wolf King's head. As long as he destroyed the Wolf King's soul, the Wolf King would not be able to use his ability regardless of how powerful it was. However, just when Jianchen's sword had stabbed out halfway, he saw a dazzling red light. The light was so powerful that it passed through the barrier around the arena of life and death and dyed the entire space there red. The red light from the ninth bone sword shone brightly, right at Jianchen. Jianchen immediately froze. Now that the red light had locked onto him, he actually felt like he had been immobilized. Even when he struggled as hard as he could and circulated his chaotic force furiously, he was unable to recover his freedom. The presence of death rapidly drew closer. Jianchen. To one side, Kaya had already completed her battle. She had slain a God King Elder with a sword condensed from the laws of destruction. Sensing that Jianchen was in danger, she immediately cried out and charged over as quickly as possible. Master Chanlong had also cast down his formation, trapping the other elder of the Swordswolf adventurers. Seeing how the red light had completely immobilized Jianchen, his face changed as well. He immediately tossed his azure disc over. However, before Kaya could approach Jianchen, she seemed to hit a barrier. She was knocked away. An invisible wall stood before her, seemingly splitting the arena into two worlds, preventing her from approaching Jianchen. On the other side, Master Chanlong's azure disc struck the barrier as well. Just like Kaya, he was unable to approach Jianchen at all. At this moment, the red light from the ninth bone sword had almost reached Jianchen's forehead. The situation was critical. At this critical moment, an extremely powerful sword intent suddenly appeared. It permeated the entire space, causing the expressions of all the people watching on to change drastically. At this critical moment, an extremely powerful sword intent suddenly appeared. It permeated the entire space, causing the expressions of all the people watching on to change drastically. Two strands of finger-sized sword chi had appeared above Jianchen's head, shining with blinding light. The strands of sword chi were small, but the power they gave off was shocking. It filled all the overgods present with fear, and even the expressions of the God Kings changed. That kid with the sword is about to die. It's just like what I said. Not only is that Swordswolf a God King, but it also possesses the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. The kid is definitely not his opponent. Hong Mo, it's your loss this time. The white-robed old man smiled at the top of the spatial battleship. Although the kid with the sword is going to lose to the Swordswolf, it's extremely impressive for him to force a God King Swordswolf to such state as an overgod. If the Swordswolf did not possess the bloodline of the ancient Skywolf, allowing him to use the bloodline's power, he definitely would not have been able to defeat the young man. Muhi said gently. Pity filled his face. Muhi, why were you acting all melancholy? What is there to be depressed about? The Saints' world is so big, and there are so many prodigies out there, but how many people are truly able to make it to the peak? Don't most of them die along the way? Across the years, who knows how many glorious prodigies have died before me? I've grown numb to it, the white-robed old man said calmly. Then he looked at Hong Mo, and a sliver of excitement appeared in his eyes. He said, You've lost the best, Hong Mo. According to what you promised us before, you'd give us 2 third-grade God-tier healing pills, right? The white-robed old man paused when he reached there. A sliver of surprise appeared on his face, and he could not help but cry out. What is this sword chi? It's actually so powerful. How can a sword chi like that appear from an overgod? At that moment, the indifferent Hong Mo also revealed a slight smile. He murmured to himself, I knew it. For the vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult, Huayan, to personally hunt him down, he definitely can't be as simple as he seems. Victory remains undecided. As soon as the two strands of profound sword chi appeared above Jian Chen's head, they shot off like two bolts of lightning. Distance seemed negligible before it, and it collided with the red light in a single flash. Boom! The two strands of profound sword chi both dispersed, instantly vanishing. The red light from the ninth bone sword of the Wolf King was clearly much more powerful than Jian Chen's profound sword chi. Although it was also dispersed, a third of its power lingered. It continued towards Jian Chen at the same speed as before. Jian Chen had already recovered his mobility after his profound sword chi had collided with the red power. However, at the same time, basically all the power of his soul had been drained from using the two strands of profound sword chi. He tottered violently and almost lost his footing. He was unable to dodge the remainder of the incoming attack. He only stabbed at the Wolf King's head as quickly as he could with the startling rainbow sword. Spurt. The sword stabbed through the Wolf King's head and destroyed his soul. Due to it being too forceful, the sword passed through the Wolf King's head and stabbed into the arena heavily, pinning the Wolf King's head to the ground. Crack. The cracks on the sword rapidly expanded, covering the entire weapon very soon. It directly fell apart like that, reduced to fragments. The startling rainbow sword had already been damaged. After the battle this time, it had finally given way, ending its use. At the same time, the power of the bloodline struck Jian Chen. Blood spurted from his mouth on the spot. As he was blown away, he collided against the barrier around the arena. The spatial barrier that separated Jian Chen, Kaya, and Chanlong vanished with the Wolf King's death. As soon as the barrier had vanished, Kaya immediately rushed over to Jian Chen. She took out the best healing pill on her and fed it to Jian Chen. Concern filled her face. Don't worry, I'm fine. I can't die, Jian Chen said weakly. He endured the excruciating pain as he struggled to sit up. Then he took out a large number of recovery pills from his space ring and ingested them. At the same time, he circulated his chaotic force to heal. The battle against the Wolf King had left him severely injured. Fortunately, he had the support of the chaotic body. Otherwise, he would have died long ago. It would have been impossible for him to last until now. Spurt. Suddenly, Jian Chen vomited another mouthful of blood. His face had already become sheet white and haggard. His wounds were not the problem. With the recovery rate of his chaotic body, he would be in perfect condition again before long. However, Jian Chen had never thought that when the red light struck him, a portion of its power would linger within him. Even though it was an extremely tiny portion, it was exceedingly powerful. Jian Chen was unable to purge it even when he circulated his chaotic force. He could only surround it temporarily with chaotic force to prevent it from ravaging his body. Is this the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline the captain of the Swordswolf adventurers mentioned? It really is very powerful. With my current cultivation, there's nothing I can do about it, Jian Chen thought. As soon as he thought about the might that had erupted from the bloodline's power earlier, he felt a lingering sense of fear. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline was simply too powerful. He used both strands of profound sword chi, yet he still lost the upper hand. He was only able to disperse a portion of it and weaken it. Otherwise, if Jian Chen had taken on the entire thing, he would probably be dead even with his chaotic body. Arg! A chilling howl rang out. The last God King of the Swordswolf adventurers died to Master Chanlong's killing formation. Now all the experts of the Swordwolf adventurers were dead. Only a few gods remained. Clearly, Jian Chen could not recover on the arena of life and death, so after barely stabilizing his wounds, he stood up and went to collect the Wolf King's space ring. Afterwards, he arrived before the Wolf King's corpse and stared at the perfect ninth bone sword. He could vaguely sense that the power of the bloodline in the bone sword had not been completely consumed in the attack before. A portion of it still remained. After hesitating slightly, Jian Chen planted a foot on the Wolf King's corpse and gripped the ninth bone sword with one hand. He pulled hard and directly wrenched the bone sword from the Wolf King's corpse. He also collected the Wolf King's monster core before leaving. Kaya and Master Chanlong had taken the space rings of the two God Kings they had just killed. They left the arena with Jian Chen. Among the 3 God Kings of the Swordswolf adventurers, only the captain was a magical beast. Naturally, the 2 elders did not possess monster cores. Only quite a while after the trio had left did a great cry ring out from the observers. At that moment, all the people who had just watched the battle went crazy. They had just witnessed 3 overgods kill 3 God Kings in an open battle. To them, this was something of legends. They would never forget this. Afterwards, news of 3 overgods slaughtering 3 God Kings in the arena of life and death spread across the entire spatial battleship. It caused a great disturbance. As for the people who caused this disturbance, Jianchen, Kaya, and Chanlong had already openly claimed the 3 high-class cabins of the God Kings they had slain. They entered seclusion in their rooms to heal. The 3 of them had suffered wounds of various severity in the battle this time. Jian Chun had fought against the strongest opponent out of all of them, so he suffered the heaviest injuries. Currently, Jian Chun sat on the jade bed in his luxurious room. His brows were furrowed tightly. He had already tried to eliminate the residual power from the Skywolf's bloodline in his body with chaotic force, but the power was extremely tenacious to his chagrin. Even when he used all the chaotic force in him, he struggled to remove even a tenth of the power. If he allowed the power of the bloodline to linger in his body, it would begin to ravage his body crazily once his chaotic force no longer suppressed it. However, if he constantly surrounded the power with chaotic force to keep it suppressed, it would affect his battle prowess. If he encountered another powerful opponent, he would struggle to use all the strength he had. This matter caused Jian Chen distress. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had already passed since the battle in the arena of life and death. During this time, Jian Chen had already made a full recovery thanks to the unimaginable regeneration of his chaotic body. However, he was unable to remove the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, no matter what he tried. All he could do was leave it inside and suppress it with a portion of his chaotic force. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had already passed since the battle in the arena of life and death. During this time, Jian Chen had already made a full recovery thanks to the unimaginable regeneration of his chaotic body. However, he was unable to remove the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline no matter what he tried. All he could do was leave it inside and suppress it with a portion of his chaotic force. Afterwards, Jian Chen took out the Wolf King's space ring and sent the senses of his soul into it to probe. The space ring was filled with various items. Aside from the basic necessities, there were large amounts of divine crystals and pills, and there were various materials for forging weapons and heavenly resources for refining pills. The space ring contained all the wealth of a God King. Although it was nowhere close to Yaxilian's wealth, it was still quite impressive to Jian Chen. That's Cloud Curl Stone. There's even essence metal of 5 elements. At this moment, Jian Chen's eyes lit up, and he immediately became elated. He had once again found 2 materials for forging the twin swords in the Wolf King's space ring. Without any hesitation, he immediately took away the Cloud Curl Stone and essence metal of 5 elements. There are fewer and fewer materials I need for forging the twin weapons. However, due to the limits of my strength in the past, I was restricted to the region of the divine kingdom of Pingtian, so collecting the materials were naturally difficult. But as my strength increases, I can gradually increase my range of search. I believe it'll become even easier to collect the other materials, Jian Chen thought. He was eager inside, eager to reforge the twin swords. The startling rainbow sword has shattered. I need to find a suitable sword soon, or my battle prowess will be drastically affected. Jian Chen got off the jade bed and made his way out. Kaya and Chanlong stayed in the rooms right next to him. When he opened the door, Jian Chen discovered a black-robed man standing outside. There was the symbol of a spatial battleship on his clothes. Jian Chen understood this person's identity when he saw the symbol. He had learnt from Master Chanlong that all the people who wore such attires were a part of the disciplinary team of the battleship. Jian Chen became rather surprised when he saw a member of the disciplinary team standing outside his room. "Sir, the elders have asked for you," the person said at this moment. His face remained emotionless, and his voice was forceful. He seemed cold. Jianchen hesitated slightly before nodding. "Let me see my friends first, and I'll be right there." The fact that the elders of the spatial battleship wanted to see him did not surprise Jianchen. At the same time, he did not turn them down. Outer space in the Saints' world was not as calm as it seemed. The dangers that lurked there even surpassed the dangers on land. The spatial battleship would encounter various dangers all the time. Even though the ship was covered with powerful formations, it could not guarantee complete safety. As a result, experts would travel on each spatial battleship to protect it when it moved through outer space. They were paramount existences in the spatial battleship. Others knew them as elders. At the same time, they controlled everything in the spatial battleship. Afterwards, Jianchen visited Kaya and Chanlong's rooms. He learned that they were fine before following the black-robed person to the highest floor of the spatial battleship. Jianchen could not help but think about Master Chanlong along the way. Jianchen had no idea what Master Chanlong was to him. They were not friends. Strictly speaking, they had even been enemies in the past. However, due to Kaya who was wedged between them, their relationship became extremely confusing. They were originally enemies, but gradually, their grievances for each other seemed to disappear unknowingly. Not to mention that it was Chanlong's assistance that allowed him to board the spatial battleship when Huayan was hunting him down. Even though he knew Master Chanlong had done this to save Kaya, he also managed to avoid Huayan through this. This made him feel like he owed Master Chanlong a favor. "We're here. The elders are inside. You can go in yourself." At this moment, the black-robed person's voice rang out. He had already arrived on the top floor of the spatial battleship unknowingly. Jianchen clasped his fist at the person who had brought him here before pushing through the door and entering. As soon as he went in, he discovered 3 old men seated inside. As the old men had all concealed their presences, they seemed to be nothing special in Jianchen's eyes. However, Jianchen knew that these 3 seemingly ordinary old men were peak experts who had reached the primordial realm. However, when Jianchen saw the red-robed old man, his eyes immediately narrowed. He seemed to remember that just when he was about to board the spatial battleship, a red-robed old man had fortunately stopped Huayan's attacks towards him. He had stopped Huayan, which allowed him and Kaya to enter the spatial battleship safely. Jianchen immediately understood that the red-robed old man was the same person who had stopped Huayan in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. Immediately he clasped his fist and said, "Junior Jianchen thanks Senior for saving my life." Hong Emo smiled faintly. "There's no need to thank me. When I interfered before, it was not to save you. Instead, it was because I was tasked with protecting the spatial battleship. Naturally, I can't let any passenger be injured. Otherwise, my dignity would take a hit." Hong Emo paused after reaching there. He studied Jianchen seriously and praised. "Jianchen, you are very impressive and extremely outstanding. You've actually managed to defeat a God King Swordswolf as a late-over god, particularly a Swordswolf that possesses a shred of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. With the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, there are very few people that can match up to him at a similar cultivation level. Once he uses that power, even mid-god kings are likely to die, yet you've survived. I never expected that." Jianchen could not help but become curious about the ancient Skywolf, seeing how the power of the bloodline was mentioned again. He asked, "Senior, is the ancient Skywolf powerful?" "You don't say. The bloodline of the ancient Skywolf rivals that of the war god from the God clan. It's just slightly worse. Moreover, the ancient Skywolf used to be one of the grand exalts of our saints' world. Do you think it's powerful? If it weren't for the fact that the bloodline was very thin, you definitely would not be alive right now." The white-robed old man stared at Jianchen with some evident annoyance. Jianchen had cost him an extremely valuable material. It was the main material for forging a god artifact, and he had collected it after great difficulty. In the end, he lost it to Hong Emo through the bet. Jianchen was astounded. He had never thought that the ancient Skywolf used to be a grand exalt of the saints' world. The white-robed old man felt great displeasure towards Jianchen since he had lost a valuable material. Looking at how astounded Jianchen had become, He could not help but scoff. It looks like you don't know what kind of existence a grand exalt is. Allow me to give you, the junior, a proper lesson. The white-robed old man paused before continuing. Above God Kings is the primordial realm. I think you know that as well. The primordial realm is split into 3 major levels, and these levels are Infinite Prime, Chaotic Prime, and Grand Prime. Grand Prime is the final point of the primordial realm. It is the last cultivation realm in cultivation. At the same time, they are existences that stand at the peak of the saint's world. However, Grand Prime only forms a realm of cultivation. There are obvious differences between power among Grand Primes. It's split into 9 heavenly layers. The first heavenly layer to the 3rd heavenly layer are early Grand Primes, the 4th heavenly layer to the 6th heavenly layer are mid-Grand Primes, and the 7th heavenly layer to the 9th heavenly layer are late Grand Primes. Across the 49 Great Planes and 81 Great Planets, there are many experts who have reached Grand Prime, but they all basically range from the 1st heavenly layer to the 6th heavenly layer, which are early Grand Primes and mid-Grand Primes. Extremely few people can become late Grand Primes. As a matter of fact, there aren't any late Grand Primes on many Great Planes and planets. There are even some without mid-Grand Primes. Logically speaking, the 9th heavenly layer of Grand Prime is the apex of the primordial realm, but in reality, the 9th heavenly layer of Grand Prime is not the peak of cultivation. Some unprecedented prodigies are able to understand the endless mysteries of the universe completely, comprehending their laws to the utmost limit. As a result, they can continue from the 9th heavenly layer of Grand Prime and reach a higher level. Although that level still makes them Grand Primes, those who can reach such a level are inconceivably powerful. They are almost above the laws of the world as if they are the universe, which is extremely terrifying. In order to show enough respect for these experts who can attain something like this, and to separate them from the other Grand Primes, these supreme experts are known as Grand Exalts. In the entire Saints world, only a handful of people possess the title of Grand Prime. The ancient Skywolf once possessed that title. Reaching there, the white-robed old man looked at Jianchun and said, "Do you understand just how powerful the ancient Skywolf is now?" Jianchun had some understanding of Grand Exalts from the sword spirits. However, the white-robed old man had just assumed that it was impossible for Jianchun, a mere overgod, to know about this. Even with that being the case, Jianchun was still doubtful after listening to the white-robed old man's words. He could not help but think about what he experienced in a Nata Grand Prime's residence palace in the lower world. He asked, "Senior, I once heard that the laws of the world are divided into 100%. The 100th% is the limit, and all you need to do is comprehend to the limit, and you'll become a Grand Exalt." The eyes of the 3 old men seated there shone. They looked at Jianchun deeply, and the white-robed old man said with some surprise, "I never thought you'd know such ancient information." That's right, the laws of the world can indeed be split into 100%, but this concept is extremely ancient. Ancient to the point where even I have only heard legends about it. However, regardless of the concept, it's just a way of understanding it. There's no major difference in reality. That's right. For example, the Immortals world that opposes us has a different name for each cultivation realm, completely different from our Saints world. However, the laws they comprehend are the same as the ones in our Saints world. It's still the 3,000 ways of the cosmos, said the red-robed old man. As soon as he heard the mention of the Immortals world, Jianchun's heart shuddered. He became cautious naturally, and he hid the twin swords deeply away. Fortunately, he was now different compared to before. As such, unless the 3 primordial realm experts personally checked over his body carefully, they would struggle to detect the existence of the twin swords. Moreover, as his strength increased in the future, his ability to hide the twin swords would become better and better. "Jianchun, can I see the 9th bone sword of the Swordswolf?" The red-robed old man looked at Jianchun calmly. "Of course," Jianchun replied without any hesitation. Immediately, he took out the bone sword from his space ring. The red-robed old man studied the bone sword for a while before sighing. He said in pity, "Although it possesses the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, it's just too thin. If it were slightly denser, I might have been willing to give you a good price for it. The red-robed old man returned it to Jianchen. He said in pity, "There's not much value to collecting this bone sword. The bloodline power in there is basically useless to me." There was nothing that Jianchen could say in response. In his eyes, since the bone sword contained a sliver of power from a grand exalt's bloodline, it was priceless. Yet to the red-robed old man, there was not even value in collecting it. It was not just the red-robed old man. He discovered that the other two primordial realm experts treated the bone sword indifferently, as if it was nothing of value. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline is extremely special. It can't be absorbed. Even if you give it to other canine magical beasts, there's nothing they can do with it because the power of the bloodline is innate. It's an innate power, the red-robed old man explained, perhaps due to the fact that he saw Jianchen's confusion. These words enlightened Jianchen. He could not help but think of the white tiger. When the ruler of the beast god continent wanted to obtain the white tiger's bloodline, he could only take over the white tiger's body through possession, and not some other method. This was because the power of the bloodline was indeed difficult to take. Aside from the possession of the body, there was basically no other method. Afterwards, the three old men asked a few more questions, such as which sect Jianchen came from, or if he had any particular background. Jianchen had prepared answers for these questions beforehand. He mentioned Fairy Hao Yu and spun a web of lies and truths, making his way through them. The three old men did not trouble Jianchen. After understanding some basic information, they dismissed him. "Hong Emo, what do you think?" He looked at Hong Emo after Jianchen had left. Hong Emo nodded. "This kid is impressive. He's able to kill god kings as a late-over god. Once he becomes a god king, he'll definitely make it onto the god king's throne. But his cultivation is just a little lackluster right now. If he becomes a god king, we can place our hopes on him. The Neptunian Divine Palace opens once every 10,000 years. If we look at the time, it'll be opening soon. That's a battlefield of god kings. If he enters as an over-god, he'll just be able to keep himself alive barely. We can't just waste the Neptunian token we obtained after so much difficulty. Let's just give up on the Neptunian Divine Palace this time, and wait another 10,000 years. As long as Jianchen is still alive, he'll definitely become a god king in 10,000 years. We can give the Neptunian token to him so that he can retrieve the items for us. And during this time, I can send some people to investigate Jianchen's background and identity, and see if he's been telling the truth or not so that we know whether to trust him." Jianchen sat down on his jade bed in his high-class cabin. He held the 9th bone sword that possessed a sliver of the power from the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, and studied it carefully. He sent the senses of his soul into the bone sword to check on the bloodline of the ancient Skywolf, to see whether the bone sword could remove the residual power in his body or not. As the senses of Jianchen's soul entered the bone sword, he gradually found the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. It was only a thumb-sized cloud of red mist. Perhaps due to being too thin, it had not even condensed into a liquid. Even though it was very thin, there was no doubt about its power. Jianchen could clearly sense a desolate, primordial presence from the power of the bloodline. It seemed to contain the unruliness and feral nature of a wild beast. However, Jianchen's face changed slightly at this moment. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline he had been suppressing in his body actually began to rampage wildly, as if it wanted to break free from Jianchen's suppression. With that thought, Jianchen controlled his chaotic force to strengthen the suppression, so that he could keep the power of the bloodline under his control. However, Jianchen was astounded very soon. As he suppressed the power of the bloodline, he discovered that the power of the bloodline in the 9th bone sword seemed to awaken. It left the bone sword and flowed into his body through his hands. The power of the bloodline within the bone sword moved extremely quickly. By the time Jianchen detected its movement, it was too late for him to stop it. In a single instance, the power entered his body through his hands. Jianchen's heart suddenly sank. Without hesitating at all, he immediately controlled his chaotic force to stop this power. Boom. Even though there was just a sliver of the bloodline power, it could not be underestimated. When the two collided, A loud sound immediately erupted. Spurt. Jianchen vomited a mouthful of blood as his body shook violently. The collision of the two powers in his body turned his body into a battlefield. He had become quite injured as blood oozed out of his pores. If it were not for his chaotic body, which was extremely tough, the force emitted from the collision of the powers would probably be enough to tear him to pieces. The two bloodline powers rapidly approached each other in Jianchen's body. They pincered down on Jianchen's chaotic force as if they wanted to join together. Just suppressing one of the powers had taken up more than half of Jianchen's chaotic force. Now that the two powers had pincered him, the pressure that Jianchen experienced was different from simple addition. As a result, Jianchen only lasted for a few seconds before a hole appeared in his chaotic force blockade, allowing the two powers to unite completely in his body. Jianchen sensed how bad the situation was. Just the power that had been deposited in his body made him helpless before. Now that the two powers had fused together, it became even more powerful. His heart sank completely. Before Jianchen could think too much, a desolate, primordial presence suddenly appeared. After the power of the bloodline had fused together, it was as if it had become whole again. It gave off a boundless presence that surprised even Jianchen. Just a rough sense of the presence made Jianchen experience an extremely ancient and distant feeling as if it had slumbered for countless years, becoming as old as the universe. The effects of the presence had taken Jianchen to an extremely ancient time. In a daze, he seemed to see an ancient sky wolf that filled up half of the cosmos, stepping on the suns and planets as it gave off an otherworldly terrifying presence. It raised its head and produced a long, high howl. From the howl, space distorted and was destroyed. The laws of the world were thrown into a mess. Spurt. Jianchen vomited a mouthful of blood again. His soul had been shaken up violently. The blurry image that had appeared in his head affected his soul greatly. In particular, the presence from the ancient skywolf made Jianchen feel like his soul was collapsing. At the same time, the bloodline power in Jianchen's body shuddered violently. It rampaged through Jianchen's body destructively. Jianchen gritted his teeth as he guarded his head closely. He did his best to break his soul free from the influence of the desolate presence, as he controlled all his chaotic force to suppress the power of the bloodline. He had even used the laws of the sword with his chaotic force to suppress the power. However, it was still not enough. After all, the two powers had become even more powerful after they had fused. Even though it was very thin, it possessed an absolute advantage in terms of quality. It was several times more powerful than Jianchen's current half-assed chaotic force. Master, allow us to assist you. At this moment, the voices of the sword spirits rang out in Jianchen's head. Afterwards, the base power of the sword spirits appeared in Jianchen's body, moving through him cautiously at an extremely gradually rate. It took part in suppressing the power. Over the years, the sword spirits had always been slumbering to recover. Rarely did they awaken. It had to be mentioned that the sword spirits recovered at a far greater rate ever since Jianchen's arrival in the Saints' world, compared to on the Tianyuan continent. They had already recovered some of their strength. As such, even though they were nowhere close to their peak, they were still able to help out Jianchen at a time like this. However, due to their special identity, they could only hide in Jianchen's body. They did not dare to show themselves in the Saints' world. Even when they assisted Jianchen in suppressing the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, they did it extremely carefully. They fully concealed their presences, without letting any of it leak out at all. The power of the bloodline suddenly shuddered when it sensed the power of the sword spirits. As if it had detected a great threat, it immediately fell quiet. It was now filled with cautiousness and vigilance. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline was indeed extremely great. However, the sword spirits possessed power at a higher level, as they originated from the yin and yang that had separated from chaos. They were spirits that had formed from strands of yin qi and yang qi. They were truly immortal and unkillable existences. In the past, the backlash from the fusion of the two swords had even claimed the life of their previous master, a Grand Exalt, someone who truly possessed overwhelming abilities and was basically a part of the universe. However, although they were heavily wounded, the sword spirits survived. In the end, with the help from the sword spirits, Jianchen finally suppressed the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. However, Jianchen felt no joy at all, as not only did he use all his chaotic force to suppress it, but he even used the laws of the sword. He was basically using everything he had. In his current situation, he could not even move about. At this moment, Jianchen's consciousness was affected once again. The desolate and primordial presence from the power of the bloodline made him see an ancient skywolf that filled up half the cosmos. It stepped on the suns and planets as it howled once again. Jianchen's soul shuddered heavily once again. The indescribably frightening pressure from the ancient skywolf had deeply shocked him. Once again, he felt like his soul was collapsing. This time, as there was no power of the bloodline running amok in his body, Jianchen was able to clearly sense the might of the ancient skywolf for longer. However, this only lasted for 5 minutes before an intense sense of dizziness forced Jianchen out of that state. In that short moment, the power of his soul that had just recovered was completely drained. He felt like the world was spinning around him as his head throbbed, tempting Jianchen to directly fall unconscious. Jianchen immediately took out a few soul recovery pills and ingested them. Fortunately, he had purchased quite a few of them while he was the imperial capital of the Xiandao Empire. Coupled with the ones he had found in the Wolf King's space ring, he possessed quite a few of them now. However, Jianchen's eyes suddenly lit up when he ingested the soul recovery pills. He was elated. He discovered that his soul had actually strengthened slightly. Chapter 2003. Breakthroughs of the Soul. The droplet of power from the ancient Skywolf's bloodline can actually assist me in refining my soul such that not only will it become more consolidated, but it will even become more powerful. Jianchen felt extremely surprised. This was quite an unexpected benefit. Jianchen ingested several soul recovery pills happily, and recovered the power of his soul as quickly as he could. The recovery rate was extremely fast. A while later, Jianchen's power of the soul had completely rejuvenated, and without any hesitation, he immediately repeated what he did before, viewing the image of the ancient skywolf the power of the bloodline created. Immediately the same image appeared in Jianchen's head. Jianchen did not know why the desolate and ancient presence of the power would cause this. He only knew that its existence could increase his strength. It was the same image as before. The same humongous and glorious skywolf stood in outer space, radiating with a terrifying presence. Jianchen's soul was shaken up once again. At that moment, he felt as insignificant as a rowboat in the surging oceans, where he would be smashed to pieces and sunken at any time. He felt like his soul was about to collapse. With his previous experience, Jianchen guarded his soul closely this time, and paid close attention to it. Very soon, he discovered in great joy that although the power of his soul was being consumed rapidly, his soul was indeed strengthening. The power of the soul can actually be strengthened like this? No, my soul is not strengthening from the pressure. Instead, the desolate and ancient presence from the power is fusing into my soul. The strengthening has to do with the presence. Jianchen discovered the secret of why his soul was strengthening very soon. However, this made him furrow his brows. He immediately checked if there were any consequences from absorbing the presence. However, Jianchen's heart suddenly sank after he checked. There was a sliver of evil, red energy in his soul. It had remained there from when he absorbed the energy of the crisis of the world back on the Tianyuan continent, having fused with his soul long ago. Right now, he discovered that instead of him absorbing the desolate presence from the power of the bloodline, it was the evil power absorbing the presence. It was just that due to the fact that his soul had fused with the evil power, his soul also benefited when the evil power absorbed the desolate presence. So it's all because of you that my soul is strengthening. Jianchen fell silent. He had no idea whether to continue the absorption or to stop immediately. A sliver of the evil spirit's power had contaminated his soul, so it brought on too many unstable factors. It had once even affected his soul and made him lose his mind. In the past few years, his strength had been increasing rapidly, so he had been able to suppress the evil spirit's power to prevent it from affecting him during that period of time. However, once the evil power grew as well, suppressing it would no longer be as easy. This was unless he could maintain an absolute advantage in terms of power to keep it suppressed. As Jianchen hesitated, the thought of Huaiyan hunting him down crossed his mind again. This made him clench his teeth suddenly as he made up his mind. He continued to absorb the presence from the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. Jianchen entered a long period of secluded cultivation. Through the power of the bloodline, his soul basically grew every single day. However, the number of soul recovery pills he needed each time gradually increased as his soul strengthened. In just half a month, Jianchen used up all the soul recovery pills on him. Without them, it would take an extremely long time for the power of his soul to recover once he used it all. However, Jianchen had no intentions of stopping. He called Kaya over and gave her a large amount of supreme-grade divine crystals to buy many soul recovery pills and heavenly resources that could allow the soul to recover on the spatial battleship. Afterwards, he continued his secluded cultivation. In the blink of an eye, 2 months had already passed. During that time, Jianchen had consumed countless soul recovery pills. Jianchen had basically bought out all the soul recovery pills and heavenly resources that could recover the power of the soul, directly causing their price to skyrocket. After the 2 months of secluded cultivation, Jianchen's soul finally broke through to the level of God Kings. Even though it was only early God King, he had reached the peak of early God King, where he was only a single step away from reach mid God King. Of course, only the power of his soul had been increased. His chaotic force and comprehension of the laws of the sword remained at late over God. However, there were some consequences as well. The sliver of evil power in Jianchen's soul had strengthened along with his soul. The desolate presence from the power of the bloodline had become extremely weak, but Jianchen still did not emerge. That one image of the ancient Skywolf treading on the celestial bodies and roaring had appeared in his mind countless times. After 2 whole months of viewing it, the image was like an iron brand, stamped into the depths of Jianchen's soul such that he would never be able to forget it. Jianchen even experienced illusions as if he was the ancient Skywolf that trode on those planets and stars, producing a howl that could make the universe tremble. Moreover, as he absorbed more and more of the presence, the illusion became stronger and stronger and occurred more and more frequently. In the end, Jianchen could not help but copy the ancient Skywolf and let out a howl. Arui. Suddenly, Jianchen actually produced a long howl, just like a wolf's. Jianchen did not do this purposefully. Instead, it was because the influence from the image of the Skywolf was just too great over the past 2 months. It was to the point where he began treating himself as an ancient Skywolf subconsciously, so he produced the howl naturally. However, when Jianchen howled out, a terrifying force radiated. All the origin energy stopped flowing and space froze. Visible waves of sound expanded into the surroundings, where all the decor and appliances in the cabin were reduced to dust in a single instance wherever it passed by. The entire cabin shook violently. If it were not for the protection of the formations, the sound waves would have probably destroyed the cabin. Jianchen opened his eyes. They were slightly dazed in the beginning, but his eyes suddenly narrowed afterwards. Only then did he abruptly realize what he had done subconsciously, which surprised him. He looked around and discovered that apart from the jade bed and cabin that formations protected, everything else had been reduced to dust. What filled him with disbelief was that all the dense origin energy in the cabin had actually vanished completely. Was the origin energy scattered by the howl I emitted accidentally? How is that possible? If that's true, just how powerful was the howl earlier? Jianchen's heart churned. He was perturbed. However, in the next moment, an intense feeling of weakness overwhelmed him. Jianchen immediately sensed that the power of the bloodline within him had almost been completely consumed. At the same time, his own vitality poured into it endlessly, transforming into new power of the bloodline to make up for the consumption. What's happening? Jianchen was completely perplexed. He was confused by what was happening. He seemed to be able to use the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. However, did the 3 elders of the spatial battleship not mention that the power could not be absorbed? Even to wolves it was useless because it was something innate. It was impossible for people born without it to use it. Yet, why was he able to use it? Is it also because of the evil power in my soul? Jianchen thought. He simply could not think of a suitable reason to explain all this. Jianchen was not the only one shocked. The sword spirits felt the same. How is this possible? Master has actually comprehended the ability of the ancient Skywolf through such a thin sliver of power? Master is a human, so this should have been impossible. Ziying cried out in disbelief. The power of the bloodline had completely settled down now. Not only did it pose no threat to Jianchen, but it had even become something that Jianchen could use, so there was no reason for him to suppress it any longer. Ziying, you can't forget about Master's existence. The world forbids it as taboo. Those things that should have been impossible have still happened with Master. I think Master's existence can turn the impossible into the possible, explained Qing Sua. Ziying nodded in agreement. Now that you've put it like that, I do think that is somewhat reasonable. But since Master's existence is forbidden by the world, it definitely isn't as simple as it seems. There must be some greater mystery hidden behind all this, or he would not be regarded as taboo. It's just a pity that although we're born from the universe, and we can foresee some things that even grand exalts who have comprehended the way of divination cannot foresee, it's only the tip of the iceberg and not the whole thing. As a result, we don't know what secret is hidden in Master, where even the universe forbids his appearance. Master is still very weak right now. He's not even a 9 heavenly Xian immortal, so he naturally won't be able to alarm the universe. However, once Master becomes powerful to the point where the entire universe has to take him seriously, or to the point where he can affect the entire universe, it's very likely that Master will be slain mercilessly by the laws of the world. Ziying was grim towards the end. Qing Sua became grim as well from that. She said sternly, the laws of the world mercilessly slaughtering someone is very rare. Ever since we gained consciousness, we've never seen anyone survive being slaughtered by the laws of the world. Probably only people with the cultivation of old Master can resist. Ziying sighed. But it's not easy to reach the same cultivation as our old Master. He was one of the 5 grand exalts of the immortals world, having reached the absolute limit of immortal exalt. Even those unprecedented prodigies may not necessarily become grand exalts. Moreover, Master cultivates the chaotic body. There have been many who had cultivated the chaotic body throughout the years, and there were plenty of talented prodigies among them. However, there has been no one who could cultivate the chaotic body to immortal exalt. Ziying paused before continuing, but Master's existence is forbidden by the world, so I believe Master will create miracles. I hope that Master can be the first person to cultivate the chaotic body to immortal exalt in all of history, and reach the legendary great perfection of the chaotic body. Otherwise, he'll definitely be slaughtered by the laws of the world. Ziying and Qing Sua conversed secretly. Jianchen had no idea what they were talking about. Right now, Jianchen was carefully inspecting the situation of his body. He placed most of his focus on the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. Currently, the power of the bloodline was absorbing Jianchen's vitality to recover. Finally, half a day later, the power of the bloodline had absorbed enough, and it stopped absorbing Jianchen's vitality. The tiny droplet of power was fully charged up once again. Sensing the sense of weakness from his body and his connection with the power of the bloodline, Jianchen felt bitter inside. He truly did not know whether the droplet of power was a curse or a blessing. This was because in that half a day, the power of the bloodline had absorbed so much vitality that it would take him a whole year to replenish it. And this was under the regeneration of the chaotic body. If it were someone else, they would probably need dozens of years, or even over a century. Afterwards, Jianchen checked on the power in his soul that had come from the evil spirit. Before, the power was very weak. He could easily suppress it with his current strength, where even if the power of his soul was drained, the evil power would struggle to affect his consciousness. After all, his strength had skyrocketed in the years he spent in the saint's world. He was no longer the puny deity who had fought against the ancestor of the Lu family. Naturally, his strength drew further and further away from the evil power. But now that the presence from the power of the bloodline had been absorbed, the evil power had benefited from it more than him. Even when the power of his soul had reached early God King, the difference with the evil power rapidly shrank. Jianchen sighed gently. He really could do nothing about the evil power in his soul right now. All he could do was strengthen himself as quickly as possible. After calming down, Jianchen left his room. As soon as he arrived outside, he discovered Kaya walking towards him in a faint blue dress. Seeing Jianchen, Kaya was clearly surprised. Afterwards, she smiled gently and said, "Jianchen, you've emerged. I can feel that your soul is even more powerful than it was the past. It looks like you've benefited quite a lot this time." "Kaya, you can sense that my soul has grown stronger?" Jianchen asked in surprise. Right now, he had completely concealed his presence such that he seemed like he had reverted back to being an ordinary person. He did not use the senses of his soul at all. Yet Kaya could sense that his soul had strengthened. Jianchen was very surprised. This was because in his current condition, let alone Kaya, an over-god, but even many god-kings would not be able to see through him if they stood right in front of him. "Yes. It's not just you. I discovered that I can clearly see through many god-kings who had concealed their presences. I can see whether they've been weakened or not," said Kaya. Jianchen stared at Kaya deeply. It was not the first time that the various unexplainable matters of Kaya had made him sink into his thoughts. He just did not understand why she would change so drastically after waking up. She was still the same person as before, except her abilities had undergone an overwhelming change. Jianchen did not believe that the large amounts of heavenly resources she had ingested while unconscious caused all this, as it was impossible for all those heavenly resources to have such an unbelievable effect. Kaya arrived before Jianchen and said, "Jianchen, a large-scale convention is about to be held on the spatial battleship. Although it's a convention, it's really a trade of treasures between cultivators. I heard that the comprehensions of the laws of the sword a primordial realm expert left behind will appear. I think that'll be somewhat helpful to you." "What? The comprehensions of the laws of the sword a primordial realm expert left behind?" Jianchen's eyes immediately lit up. He had already obtained the resources he needed to reach the 12th layer of the chaotic body. All he lacked was comprehension. Once he had made progress on comprehension, and reached the major achievement of sword spirit, he would be able to break through with his chaotic body to the 12th layer. Chapter 2005. The convention. Jianchen yearned to reach the 12th layer of the chaotic body. This yearning was so great that it was a burning desire, burning more and more brightly in his heart. The 12th layer of the chaotic body was equivalent to God King in the saints' world. When Huayan hunted him down on the cloud plane, he would have been able to resist at the very least if he were at the 12th layer of the chaotic body. Of course, he still would not be Huayan's opponent. He would have even been able to put up a fight against the 3 late God King protectors. "Kaya, when is this convention going to be held?" Jianchen asked. He had to obtain the comprehension of the laws of the sword a primordial realm expert left behind. Although it did not necessarily guarantee that he would be able to reach the major achievement of sword spirit, it was still a chance after all. Looking at how much Jianchen cared, Kaya smiled faintly. "There are another 24 hours before the convention starts." 24 hours? That's soon then. I'll head over right now. Jianchen thought before going to where the convention would be held with Kaya. Originally, they wanted to call Master Chanlong as well, but ever since his battle against the God Kings from the Swordswolf adventurers, he had been healing. He still had not emerged from seclusion. The convention was held in a huge compartment of the spatial battleship. It was 500 meters in length and width, and it could hold over 10,000 people. Although the convention still had not happened, over 1,000 people had already gathered here. They conversed with each other as they waited for its start patiently. At the same time, a few cultivators had rolled out clothes to set up stalls to sell various items. There were all sorts of things, including some precious items. Jianchen arrived here under Kaya's lead. He glanced out casually and discovered that basically all the people who had gathered here were gods and over-gods. There were god kings as well, but he only managed to see 2. In a place like the divine kingdom of Pingtian, there were indeed only a handful of god kings, but on a spatial battleship that moved between major planes, they were relatively more commonplace. "Master, there's a piece of sky-linked dark dragon rock. It's 100 meters right in front of you. Suddenly, the voices of the sword spirits rang out in Jian Chen's head. Jian Chen's eyes lit up with that. He knew about the Skylink Dark Dragon Rock. It was one of the materials he needed to forge the twin swords. Immediately, he made his way over with Kaya. When Jian Chen found the Skylink Dark Dragon Rock, he discovered that the supreme grade material was placed on a stall an old woman set up on the ground. There were all sorts of items scattered there, with only 3 or 4 materials at the supreme grade. The old woman seemed extremely simple. Her gray hair had already withered, and she reeked of death. It made people feel that she was someone who was about to pass away from old age. "Senior, how much for this material?" Jian Chen pointed at the Skylink Dark Dragon Rock and asked calmly. "It's a supreme grade material. 10 blocks of high-grade divine crystal," the old woman said with her eyes closed while she sat on the ground. Her voice was filled with weakness. Jian Chen frowned. 10 blocks of high-grade divine crystal was an astronomical price. After all, the supreme grade materials in the auctions of the divine kingdom of Pingtian had only fetched up to a price of several 100,000 high-grade divine crystals. That was less than a single block. However, after hesitating slightly, Jian Chen took out 10 blocks of high-grade divine crystal to buy the material. It was difficult to collect the materials required for forging the twin swords, so he could not miss out any of them when he came across them. Moreover, he did not lack divine crystals. "Jian Chen, this old granny is very powerful." When Jian Chen took the material and left the old woman's stall, Kaya's voice rang out in his head. "Yes. Even I can't sense her presence at all. She must be a god king." Jian Chen nodded. Kaya became rather stern. She glanced in the direction of the old woman and said, "No, I feel like the old granny is not a god king. The feeling she gives me is even more terrifying than god kings. It's just that she's extremely injured and extremely weak." Jian Chen immediately froze up from that. However, he recovered in just a single instance. He thought of the old woman again, and was secretly surprised. Afterwards, Jian Chen wandered around, visiting all the stalls there. However, there were no other materials for the twin swords to his disappointment. In the blink of an eye, 24 hours had passed. The convention formally began. What was a convention? Naturally, it was a gathering where cultivators communicated with each other, sharing their experiences and knowledge on cultivation. There were also trades of treasure. Jian Chen did not take part in the conversations about cultivation. He directly went to where treasures would be traded. He had come here for the purpose of the comprehensions of the laws of the sword from a primordial realm expert. The trades held here were different from auctions. Items at auctions would be sold to the highest bidder, but items would only be traded between cultivators for other items they were looking for here. The first is a supreme quality defensive treasure, the 100 Paths armor. Everyone knows just how precious a supreme quality defensive treasure is, so I won't explain it. In the region for trades, a white-robed, middle-aged man took out a black armor. The presents he gave off had already reached the level of god kings. The appearance of the supreme quality defensive treasure immediately attracted everyone's attention. Many people revealed a desire and yearning to possess it. The treasure attracted even the attention of Jian Chen and Kaya, who had just arrived here. The treasure was in perfect condition. It alone could block the attacks of god kings, and weaken them such that the wearer would only suffer minimal damage. On the other hand, the damaged, defensive god artifact Jian Chen possessed was basically useless aside from its toughness. If it was used to block attacks that were just too powerful, the wearer would still experience the complete force even if the armor would emerge unscathed. The wearer would be shaken to pieces. At this moment, the middle-aged man said again, "I'm looking for a god-tier material, the 7-colored cloud silk. If someone has the 7-colored cloud silk, this 100 Paths armor is yours." Many people were immediately disappointed when they heard that the middle-aged man wanted a god-tier material. "I have a first-grade god-tier material, meteoric iron. It's useless to me, so I'm looking to trade it for other god-tier materials or pills. I have 3 supreme-grade blood-condensing fruits, and I'm looking for pills or heavenly resources that can heal the soul at the same grade. I have a 9th-grade cultivation method. I'm looking for." Afterwards, More and more people took out their treasures to take part in the trading. Some people called out loudly, while others set up stalls. They placed down a small wooden sign that emphasized what they were looking for. Jianchen searched through the area carefully. It had to be mentioned that there were extremely many items that appeared here, covering all the various types. There were materials, heavenly resources, cultivation methods, truth-tier battle skills, and various books on the experiences and knowledge of cultivation. However, to his disappointment, he failed to find the comprehensions of the laws of the sword a primordial realm expert left behind. At this moment, Jianchen's eyes narrowed slightly. He noticed the old woman who had sold him the Skylink Dark Dragon Rock, the person who Kaya suspected to be a primordial realm expert, make her way through the crowd slowly. Afterwards, she sat down on the ground and set up a stall again. There were quite a few more items compared to the previous stall. Aside from the materials Jianchen saw earlier, there were some more heavenly resources. However, when Jianchen saw the stone tablet that the old woman slowly took out from her space ring, his heart suddenly shuddered. He could sense a tremendously sharp sword intent from the stone tablet. I possess a stone tablet that contains a slash from a primordial realm expert who has comprehended the laws of the sword. It contains much of the expert's comprehension. The old woman's weak voice rang out. It was not loud, but everyone heard it. Immediately, the entire convention fell silent. There was a slash from a primordial realm expert that contained most of his comprehension. This piece of information exploded in the heads of everyone. Chapter 2006. Trading the God Artifact Armor. The appearance of the comprehension of the laws of the sword a primordial realm expert left behind had completely upset the natural procession of the convention. All the cultivators who still discussed their personal insights on cultivation in the first area stopped at that moment. They bid farewell to each other politely before immediately gathering in the direction of the old woman. Many of their eyes burned with desire, while some other people had their doubts. Even the god kings at the convention were drawn over by the comprehensions the primordial realm expert left behind. Excuse me, do you really have the comprehension of the laws of the sword from a primordial realm expert? Chirua, you don't comprehend the laws of the sword. Why were you interested as well? The comprehension of laws from a primordial realm expert is just too valuable. Since I've come across it, I obviously can't miss it. Even if it doesn't help me, I can still use it to trade for what I want. Ma'am, do you really have the comprehension of the laws of the sword from a primordial realm expert? You're not using some comprehensions god kings left behind to mess with us, right? Surely the comprehensions are real, right? In the blink of an eye, the surroundings of the old woman had already become crowded. Many people wished to see it personally, while some people even directly doubted the old woman. Jianchen stood in the crowd and witnessed what was happening before him. He could not help but furrow his brows. With so many people expressing interest in the comprehension of the laws of the sword from a primordial realm expert, it would not be easy for him to obtain it. He might miss out on it altogether. The old woman's face did not change as she listened to the various doubts of the people around her. She sat on the ground and took things easy. She picked up the stone tablet, and she said with an old and feeble voice, "This is what I was talking about. A primordial realm expert who comprehended the laws of the sword left behind this slash. It contained slivers of his comprehension." Everyone stared at the stone tablet. It was not large, only a foot wide and 2 feet tall. Indeed, there was a slash on it. Everyone could not help but send the senses of their souls in there. In just a short while, their faces changed suddenly. What a powerful sword intent. That's right. It is indeed from a primordial realm expert. It can't be wrong. Senior, what do you want for the stone tablet? Everyone cried out. No wonder doubted whether the stone tablet was the real thing or not anymore. At this moment, the old woman slowly took out over 100 jade slips from her space ring. She placed them all on the ground, and she said, "I am willing to trade this for anything I need. It can be supreme grade divine crystals, heavenly resources, or healing pills. Of course, it would be best if they are god-tier healing pills. If you don't wish to reveal your treasures before all these people, you can take a jade slip and detail what you can trade on there." This king is willing to use supreme-grade divine crystals to trade for the primordial realm comprehensions. May I ask how many supreme-grade divine crystals you are looking for? A god king asked as desire burned in his eyes. Jian Chen's expression changed when he heard that. Although he had spent quite a few supreme-grade divine crystals on soul recovery pills, he still had over 30 blocks on him. If it were possible, he would naturally hope he could use supreme-grade divine crystals to trade for the comprehension. The ears of many other people present pricked up as well aside from Jian Chen. Clearly, they were all like Jian Chen, hoping to trade for it using supreme-grade divine crystals. The old woman glanced past the God Kings calmly and said, "No less than 100 blocks of supreme-grade divine crystal. Of course, the more the better. We can decide through bidding." "What? 100 blocks of supreme-grade divine crystals? Are you pulling my leg?" The God King's eyes widened, and he could not help but cry out. Even a few God Kings would not be able to pay such a great price even after they had taken out everything they possessed. Jian Chen also gasped. The supreme-grade divine crystals he had obtained from Yashi Lian were far greater than the wealth of many God Kings, but there was not even 100 blocks of supreme-grade divine crystal. "I have a supreme-grade defensive treasure and a supreme-grade offensive treasure. Are you willing to trade?" Another God King said. "I'll trade if they're God artifacts," said the old woman. The God King's eyes widened, and he left with a sneer. The old woman's appetite was extraordinary. A primordial realm expert's comprehensions were very precious, but it was nowhere close to a God artifact. "I have a God-tier heavenly resource here. I have a bottle of 9th-grade truth-tier healing pills." Afterwards, quite a few more people stated what they could offer. Many of these items were extremely precious. Of course, the people who dared to state what they could offer so fearlessly possessed impressive cultivations as well. They were basically all God Kings. A few people had recorded their treasures on the jade slips and passed it to the old woman as well. They were unwilling to publicly reveal their treasures. Hesitation flickered through the eyes of the old woman from time to time. Clearly, she had already found some treasures that interested her. As the priceless treasures were stated around him, Jian Chen's heart sank completely. He did not have enough supreme-grade divine crystals at all, and he had nothing that could match the value of the others apart from supreme-grade divine crystals. He did not even possess 9th-grade truth-tier heavenly resources, let alone God-tier heavenly resources. That was the same case with healing pills. Although he possessed a few God King-level monster cores, he gave up on that thought when he considered that it was extremely likely for the old woman to be a primordial realm expert. Aside from all that, he only had the damaged Anata Tower and the damaged piece of armor. "I have a God-tier healing pill here. I want your comprehension tablet." At this moment, a young man in gold and violet robes walked over. Even though he was just an over-god, a God King followed him. It's young Master Qi of the Qi family. The Qi family is a large clan in the Blood Sun Empire of the Cloud Plain. It's said that they have several primordial realm experts. Quite a number of discussions immediately sprang up in the surroundings with the appearance of the young man. Their gazes at him were all filled with some angst. The old woman's eyes also lit up when she heard about the God-tier healing pill. She was heavily injured and in desperate need of God-tier healing pills. "Senior, I have a defensive God artifact. I want to trade it for your comprehension tablet." Just when the old woman was about to make up her mind, Jian Chen's voice rang out. To no surprise, he held the damaged armor in his hand. Even though the mysterious liquid from the ancestor of the Mo family had repaired the God artifact, only the surface was fixed. In reality, the engravings and powers inside were completely damaged. Repairing it was extremely difficult. Jian Chen had taken out the God artifact because he was out of choices. He did not want to miss out on the comprehension of the laws of the sword a primordial realm expert left behind. Moreover, he knew that it was impossible for him to pay the price required to completely repair the God artifact. In addition, the assistance that the God artifact provided him was diminishing. Although he could avoid piercing attacks when he wore it, the great force would still pass through to his body completely. It would still make him injured, so he was naturally willing to give up on it at such a crucial time. The people in the surroundings were stunned when they heard him mention defensive God artifact. However, when they looked at it, They were all disappointed. Clearly, they could tell that the god artifact was damaged, so its value was greatly decreased. The old woman looked over as well. Pity appeared on her face, and she shook her head while sighing gently. If your defensive god artifact was in perfect condition, I'd be willing to trade with it. It's just a pity. However, when she reached there, the old woman suddenly paused. Her dull eyes immediately lit up as she stared at the god artifact. She studied every inch of it carefully, and her emotions gradually became mixed. She became slightly absent-minded. Only a while later did the old woman return to her senses. She sucked in a deep breath, and she looked at Jian Chun with her old eyes. She asked, "Little brother, may I ask where you obtained this defensive god artifact?" "I obtained it after I killed an enemy," Jian Chun responded. At the same time, he secretly tightened his guard. From how the old woman had reacted when she saw the god artifact, she seemed to recognize it. The old woman nodded slowly. She said nothing as her gaze became rather mixed. She also seemed to think back to the past. Afterwards, she looked at the young master of the Qi family and began to hesitate. But in the end, the old woman passed the tablet to Jian Chun. She said, "I'll trade with you." After the successful trade, Jian Chun had managed to obtain the stone tablet with the primordial realm comprehensions of the laws of the sword just as he had wished. However, he did not feel happy at all. This was because he knew that the damaged god artifact he had taken out was worth far more than the stone tablet. It was just that he urgently needed to increase his strength, eagerly hoping he could reach the next level with his comprehension of the laws of the sword and formally become a god king. As a result, he could only trade the damaged god artifact away. Jian Chun sighed inside. He ignored the envious gazes in the surroundings, and stowed the stone tablet away in his space ring with a flip of his hand. At this moment, the young master of the Qi family arrived before Jian Chun. Although he had failed to obtain the stone tablet, he was not displeased at all. Instead, he smiled and clasped his fist at Jian Chun extremely politely. "You must be the supreme overgod who defeated the captain of the Swordswolf adventurers in the arena of death, and also shook up the southern and northern region, Jian Chun. I am Qi Xiang, and I've always admired you. I never thought I'd be able to meet you here today on the spatial battleship. It truly is an honor." You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.